Well, good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to give you a very warm welcome to tonight's meeting of the Hedge End, West End and Botley Local Area Committee. This is being broadcast and recorded via Microsoft Teams Live. My name is Councillor Cynthia Garton, and I'm chair of this committee and will be conducting the meeting this evening. During the meeting, you will hear from members of the committee who are on your screen now. I will be inviting them to introduce themselves in a few moments. Also present are the officers from Eastleigh Borough Council, who are now being shown on the screen. They will present their reports that have been written and provide support for the committee this evening. During the meeting, you may also see councillors looking at the other papers or devices on which they have made notes. If we experience a connection problem, this event will be paused. If a councillor loses connection or joins later, I will ask them to introduce or reintroduce themselves for the benefit of the viewers. In the unlikely event of myself losing connection, what would normally happen is our Vice Chair, Councillor Janice Asman, would take over. Now, I believe Janice has had some issues and has had difficulty connecting with us tonight. So I will ask members if they are okay if we vote Councillor Richard Gomer in as a temporary Vice Chair who can take over in the event of me losing connection. So if you could just vote with a nod, that would be good.
Yes.
Yep, good. Everyone's happy with that. Excellent, thank you. Just bear with me. Thank you very much, councillors. We are very reliant on the technology, so please bear with us as this committee has the largest number of councillors attending a virtual meeting to date. I am now going to invite each member to introduce themselves, and we will start with the wards. Right, Botley ward members. Councillor Curl.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Trace.
Good evening, Councillor Trace from Botley ward.
Thank you very much, councillor. We'll now move on to Hedge End North. Councillor Corbyn.
Good evening, everybody. Ian Corbyn, Hedge End North.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Jerd.
Good evening, Councillor Lucy Jerd, Hedge End North.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jerd. Councillor Pretty.
Good evening, Derek Pretty, Hedge End North.
Thank you. We will now move to Hedge End South. Councillor House.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Keith House, Hedge End South Ward.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. And I also represent Hedge End South. Unfortunately, Councillor Allingham has sent her apologies, but she is a Hedge End South councillor. We will now move to West End North. Councillor Gomer.
Good evening, I'm Richard Gomer for West End North.
Thank you, Councillor Gomer. Councillor Tennant.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Bruce Tennant, West End North.
Thank you, councillor. And West End South. As I mentioned before, unfortunately, we have a connection problem with Councillor Asman. She is a West End South councillor, but I also now move to Councillor Bearder.
Hello there, I'm Councillor Bearder from West End South.
Thank you very much, councillors. I think it's good for our members of the public who are watching this evening to see their councillors. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. Public participation during this virtual committee will be undertaken in a slightly different way. The members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited into the live event at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes each to speak. I will inform the speaker if they reach their allotted time. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, however, it is not possible to invite or receive comments from members of the public. Due to the potential length of this meeting, we will probably take a 5-minute break after the Botley Park application. Thank you very much. So let's start with the agenda, councillors. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Laura, do we have any other apologies apart from Councillor Allingham?
Councillor Asman, as she is unable to access the meeting, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. I should have mentioned you may hear the voices of our Democratic officers throughout this meeting, and Laura Johnson is our Senior Democratic Officer. Thank you. We will now move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of March 2020. We have the following administrative amendments to make. 1. Under item 39, the minutes state that Councillor Margaret Allingham declared a pecuniary interest in agenda item 9, Hedge End, West End and Botley various roads traffic regulation order as a resident of Upper Northern Road. Councillor Allingham has requested that the word pecuniary is changed to personal, as stated at the meeting and recorded elsewhere in the minutes. Item 2, Botley Parish Councillor Graham Hunter has also made contact with officers to request that his objection to the Ravenscroft Way TRO is formally recorded, as it was not shown in the officer's report in agenda item 9. And finally, under item 44, I need to seek clarification from members that the following roads were those that were approved under agenda item 9, namely Aspen Road should read Aspen Close at its junction with White Beam Road, Oak Tree Gardens at its junction with Granada Road, Ravenscroft Way at its junction with Oaklands Road, September Close at its junction with Upper New Road, the Foxgloves at its junction with Townhouse Close, Ullswater Avenue at its junction with Eden Road, Upper Northern Road at its junction with Netley Firs Road, St Catherine's View, Chalice Court, Cherrywood, Wheatsheaf Court and the Close, Wilderness Heights with its junction at West End Road and Yardley Road. Just to note that Councillors Asman, Bearder and House were absent for this item, so they cannot vote at the moment. So in order for me to sign these as a true record, may I have a proposer, please?
I'm happy to propose that. Councillor
Thank you very much, Councillor Corbyn. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Lucy Jerd. Right, I will now ask Laura to do a roll call for a vote, please, whether you are in agreement or disagree. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Allingham and Councillor Asman have given their apologies. Councillor Bearder, you were absent, so I presume you are abstaining.
Yes, I'm abstaining, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Corbyn?
Agree.
Councillor Garton?
Agree.
Councillor Gomer?
Agree.
Councillor House?
Abstaining, as already commented by the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jerd?
Agree.
Councillor Curl?
Agree.
Councillor Pretty?
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant?
Agree.
Councillor Trace?
Agreed.
That's agreed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. So I can now sign those minutes as a true record. Right, moving on to item 3 then, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, could you please indicate now, and when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. No, I will silence. I will take that there are no declarations of interest this evening then. Thank you, councillors. Item 4 is public participation. There is no public participation this evening as we have no one registered by the deadline. So item 4, Item 5, is now the Chair's report. Thank you, councillors. The COVID-19 local response. I would like to thank everyone within the HeWeb area who has volunteered to help those in need during the current crisis. I am aware of local groups and individuals who have helped with shopping, the collection of prescriptions, and making phone calls to those who have had to socially isolate. I'd just like to particularly mention Eastleigh One Community and King's Community Church. The food bank at King's Community Church has been very busy during these difficult times. And I'd like to thank residents and supermarkets who have donated and who are still continuing to donate. There has been a true community spirit, and I look forward to building upon this as part of the Council's recovery programme. It has also been very uplifting to see residents' messages of thanks for those providing the Council's essential services, such as our refuse collection staff. I'd also like to mention our street scene teams who have continued to cut the grass, empty the bins, and keep our parks and streets clean and tidy. We have also had a tremendous effort from our back office staff who have been working tirelessly to support our community. It goes without saying that we need to thank our NHS staff and all those frontline workers. Finally, I would like to express my sincere condolences to anyone who has been affected by the virus and has lost a loved one. Moving on to the HeWeb annual review. My annual review is included in this meeting's agenda. I was disappointed that I could not deliver my speech to the annual assemblies this year due to the crisis. However, at the committee's request, my report will be forwarded to Hedge End Town Council, West End and Botley Parish Councils after this meeting. The former Budgeons car park. Demolition of the former Budgeons store has now been completed. A temporary extension to the existing car park has been prepared and the entire car park was actually reopened today. We have been very encouraged by the positive response from members of the public, and their comments will be considered as to its temporary use for other possible purposes before a final decision is made on the site. The opening of the car park coincided with the opening of more shops and businesses in Hedge End today. The car park remains free of charge and the opening times are the same as before. Itchen Valley Country Park. It was decided to keep the country park open during the crisis, and this has been appreciated by visitors who have made many positive comments on social media and to the park staff. Plans are being made to reopen the toilets on a trial basis, and it is hoped that the hatch to the cafe can be used to serve takeaway drinks and ice creams once safety issues have been resolved. The Wilden swimming pool roof. I am absolutely delighted to see that the pool roof project has continued to progress despite the many challenges on site. The structure is in place and it is easy to envisage the striking impact that this will make as pupils, teachers and customers enter the campus. It is currently forecasted that the project will be completed in September, and that concludes my chair's report. Thank you. We will now move on to item 6, which is appointments to outside bodies, and I will ask Julia Burt, our local area manager, to introduce the report, and she will also state the recommendations. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. In summary, this report looks at regulatory panels, which are formal decision-making panels required to deliver the Council's statutory obligations. The other groups comprise those established to share information or manage local initiatives. Outside bodies are external organisations, including formal or informal partnerships, to which the Borough Council is a party, or which have requested that the Borough Council appoint an elected councillor. or a representative to them or to which the council expects to make appointments. The report is as printed and the recommendations are as follows. Number 1, the nominations for 2020-21 municipal year appointments to regulatory panels and other groups as set out in paragraph 5 are approved. And number 2, the proposed nominations for 2020-21 municipal year appointments to outside bodies as set out in Appendix 1 are approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julia. Do members have any questions on that report or recommendations, please? No? Okay, can't see that anyone wants any questions. Very good. Right, could I have a proposer to move that recommendation, please? Councillor Goma, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Jerd. Any debate, councillors, before we move on to a vote? No? Okay. Laura, could you carry out the roll call, please?
Of course, Chair.
Thank you.
As before, Councillor Allingham and Councillor Asman are absent. Councillor Bearder.
Agree.
Councillor Corbyn.
Agree.
Councillor Garton.
Agree.
Councillor Goma.
Agree.
Councillor House.
Agree.
Councillor Jerd.
Agree.
Councillor Curl.
Agree.
Councillor Pretty.
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant.
Agree.
Councillor Trace.
Agreed.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. Thank you, councillors. We'll now move on to item 7, which is the financial management report. And there again, I'll ask Julia to introduce the report and state the recommendations, please, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report identifies funding for provision to meet local need and to enhance the local area. It also includes an update on financial decisions made during the COVID-19 emergency. The recommendations are as follows. 1, to approve the allocation of developers' contributions of £29,000 for the stated projects at Hedge End Medical Centre. Number 2, approves the allocation of the developer's contribution of £2,374 towards the security measures at Hedge End train station. And number 3, notes the financial decisions made during the COVID-19 emergency to date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julia. Any questions from members on Julia's report? No? Okay, thank you very much. I don't see anyone indicating. Right, do I have a proposer on the recommendations then on that report, please?
Yes, I'd like to propose a recommendation as written.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pretty. Do I have a seconder? Councillor House. Thank you very much. Right, Laura, could I ask you to do the roll call again? Oh, first of all, is there any debate? Sorry. Anybody want to make any comments at all on that particular item? No? Okay, then Laura, thank you. Could you do the roll call, please?
Councillor Bearder.
Agree.
Councillor Corbyn.
Agree.
Councillor Garton.
Agreed.
Councillor Goma.
Agreed.
Councillor House.
Agree.
Councillor Jerd.
Agreed.
Councillor Curl.
Agreed.
Councillor Pretty.
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant.
Agree.
Councillor Trace.
Agreed.
Thank you, councillors. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, councillors. Right, we'll now move on to item 8, which is the annual review of Hedge End, West End and Botley area. This will just be for noting only, and I will just ask Julia Burt just to introduce the report, please, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report highlights the main areas of work undertaken by the Hedge End, West End and Botley HEWEB Local Area Committee in 2019-20. It also includes a summary of the Chair's annual review for 2019-20, and normally this review is presented at the annual assemblies hosted by Hedge End Town Council, West End Parish Council and Botley Parish Council. But as the Chair has alluded to in her report, these meetings were cancelled because of the COVID-19 crisis. So just to confirm that the recommendation is that councillors note the contents of this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Julia. Could you confirm that is just for noting? Thank you. We'll now move on to item 9, which is fees and charges, Hedge End Railway Station and Itchen Valley Country Park. And Julia, yes again, I will ask you if you could please introduce the report and state the recommendations. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Chair. The proposals for car parking charges at Stradley Way, Hedge End train station and Itchen Valley Country Park are the responsibility of this committee. At its meeting on the 27th January 2020, this committee approved an increase in charges. The Council was required to consult on these proposals by issuing a notice of variation and now needs to decide whether to implement these proposals considering the one objection received. This report was due to be considered by the committee at its scheduled meeting on the 30th of March 2020. However, this meeting was cancelled because of COVID-19. So the recommendations are that the committee approves the amendments as detailed in paragraph 3 of this report to the parking charges at Stradley Way and at the car parks at Hedge End train station and Itchen Valley Country Park. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much again, Julia. Any questions from members, please, regarding this report and recommendation? No? Okay. In which case, do I have a proposer to move the motion, please? Councillor Lucy Jerd proposing and Councillor Tim Bearder is seconding. Any debate, councillors, regarding this? Personally, I have to say, when I looked at the report, given how much the cost is for parking at Southampton Parkway, I would think that parking at Hedge End Station is incredible value for money. Anyway, any other debate or comments, please, councillors? Nope. Okay then, right. Laura, could we take a vote? And Laura, could you carry out the roll call again, please? Thank you.
Of course, Chair. Councillor Bearder.
Agree.
Councillor Corbyn.
Agree.
Councillor Garton.
Agree.
Councillor Gomer.
Agree.
Councillor House.
Agree.
Councillor Jerd.
Agree.
Councillor Curl.
Agree.
Councillor Pretty.
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant.
Agreed.
Councillor Trace.
Agreed.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you, councillors. Right, our next item, item 10, is the Upper St Helens Traffic Regulation Order. I just remind councillors that they must be present for the duration of this item in order to be able to vote. So I'm now going to ask Barbara Thomas, our traffic engineer, to present the report. And this has been pre-recorded, although Barbara is still with us, available for questions later. Thank you. Do we have some difficulties with that report, Laura?
Bear with us just a second, Chair. I think Barbara's just trying to share the video. Just give us a second.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, apologies.
No, that's fine. Just to make everyone aware of what's happening.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Thomas and I'm the Traffic Management Engineer for Eastleigh Borough Council. This presentation is to explain the traffic regulation proposals for Upper St Helens Road and nearby surrounding roads in Hedge End, to run through the representations received in response to the public notice advertising those proposals and the engineer's response, and to summarise the recommendations to the committee. A scheme of no waiting at any time restrictions, denoted by double yellow lines, was introduced in Upper St Helens Road in 2017. This extended the existing double yellow lines at its junction with Heath House Lane further into Upper St Helens Road by 37 metres on the west side and 15 metres on the east. Double yellow lines were also introduced on both sides of the road for 100 metres in the vicinity of Lyons Place. A further scheme of yellow lines was introduced on an experimental basis in November 2018. These restrictions essentially joined the two aforementioned sets of restrictions together on the northwest side and extended them to number 49, northeast of Stockholm Drive. And on the southeast side, the double yellow lines were extended from number 46 to 52, again northeast of Stockholm Drive. Following receipt of a number of representations, the Hedge End, West End and Botley Local Area Committee decided at its meeting of the 27th of January 2020 to advertise a proposal to reproduce the restrictions contained within the experimental TRO, with the exception of part of the experimental double yellow line restrictions on the southeast side of Upper St Helens Road and on the north side of Stockholm Drive. The single yellow lines, which had been marked on the southeast side of Upper St Helens Road between numbers 10 and 32, have already been removed. It was necessary to advertise the amended restrictions on a permanent basis, owing to being out of time to amend the experimental TRO. The new restrictions, if introduced, would be followed by a review of all waiting restrictions in Upper St Helens Road after 6 months in operation. Owing to the coronavirus outbreak, the decision about the current proposal has been delayed by approximately 2.5 months, and during this time the experimental TRO, having a maximum lifetime of 18 months, expired on the 12th of May. The new proposals were advertised on the 31st of January 2020. The differences from the existing experimental TRO are shown in the following two slides. The red outline shows the section of double yellow line which will be removed from Upper St Helens Road outside numbers 46 and 48. And here, the red outline shows the double yellow lines that will be removed from Stockholm Drive. 8 representations were received, 5 in favour and 3 objections. Residents in favour of the restrictions state that they have improved sightlines from driveways, improved road safety and prevented commuter parking. Some residents would like to see waiting restrictions increased further, and for no waiting at any time double yellow line restrictions to be introduced on the southeast side of Upper St Helens Road, in place of the single yellow lines which have recently been removed. Some feel that removal of some of the experimental waiting restrictions is a detrimental step. Another resident suggested that double yellow lines could be removed outside numbers 40 to 46 Upper St Helens Road to allow for some curbside parking. The engineer's response is curbside parking on residential roads is not uncommon nowadays, and it appears that a number of residents in the vicinity rely on being able to park on street, particularly residents from Lyons Place, where demand for parking outstrips supply. In itself, parking at the curbside is not considered to be a hazard. Drivers on suburban roads should expect to encounter vehicles parked at the curbside, vehicles emerging from side roads and driveways, and pedestrians crossing the road. And the Highway Code instructs that drivers should adjust their driving behaviour accordingly. There are no nearby centres of employment or railway stations that would attract significant commuter parking in this part of Hedge End. Allowing some curbside parking on one side of the road assists in reducing traffic speeds by narrowing the available carriageway and forcing vehicles to give way to oncoming traffic. On this lightly trafficked road, this does not lead to delays of more than a few seconds. The double yellow lines from 34 to 46 Upper St Helens Road were introduced a few years ago, and we are unable to consider amending or removing them as part of the current proposals. They will be considered in the review of all waiting restrictions in Upper St Helens Road. 3 residents objected to the proposals on the grounds that excessive waiting restrictions force some residents and their visitors to park some distance away, which is particularly difficult for elderly or disabled people. The removal of so much curbside parking will encourage speeding. The proposed double yellow lines opposite number 60 Lions Place make no sense. It should either be removed or extended the full length opposite numbers 54 to 60. The engineer's response: the single yellow lines, which had been marked outside numbers 10 to 34 Upper St Helens Road, have now been removed. This should facilitate parking reasonably close to properties. The level of traffic is such that less mobile pedestrians should not find it difficult to cross the road. The Highway Code does instruct that motorists should give way to pedestrians crossing the road. As mentioned previously, the restrictions introduced in 2017 are not being considered as part of the current proposals, but will be reviewed in due course. The objection to the double yellow line restriction proposed for opposite number 60 Lions Place makes a valid point that it should either extend the full length opposite numbers 54 to 60 or be removed. The recommendation for Lions Place, therefore, is not to make the double yellow lines permanent. In summary, the recommendation is to introduce the waiting restrictions on Upper St Helens Road, Stockholm Drive, Heath House Lane and Heath House Close as advertised on the 31st of January 2020. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Can I just confirm that we saw all the slides, please?
Yes, that
everything was there.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much. Right, we do have representations now from members of the public, and I'm going to pass shortly to Siobhan Strand, our Assistant Local Area Manager, who is going to read the written statements. The first 3 statements are from residents who objected to the yellow lines. Siobhan, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Chair. The first objection is from, and I will read it as following. Why does Eastleigh Borough Council continue to paint so many single and double yellow white lines in residential areas? I recently asked Eastleigh Borough Council to explain what was meant by reason 3, in brackets, out of 3, for the proposed traffic regulation order, which stated, quote, to protect amenities, unquote. I suggested there were no amenities and was responded to by Ian Austin, who said the footway and grass verge could be counted as an amenity. I do not believe anyone would consider a footway or grass verge to be an amenity. An amenity is an open field or swimming pool, for example. Otherwise, the suggestions is all roads with grass verges or footway are amenities, which should be protected by single or double yellow lines. I would like to suggest that the reasons for this TRO on Upper St Helens Road are not being carefully thought through, and when this is questioned by the public, Eastleigh Borough Council tries to come up with any answer to justify their, quote, statement of reasons, unquote. I also asked why reason 1 stated to, quote, protect from danger, unquote. I suggested there was no danger, and Eastleigh Borough Council's own report by Barbara Thomas stated there were no accidents in their last 5 years. Ian Austin replied to me stating, quote, this is your opinion, unquote. The second reason stated, quote, to allow flow of traffic, unquote. Again, Eastleigh Borough Council's own report by Barbara Thomas stated there were no issues with the flow of traffic. Therefore, there is no good evidence, and actually evidence to the contrary, for each of the 3, quote, statement of reasons, unquote, for the proposed TRO. And indeed, the reasons for the original experimental TRO resulted in double yellow lines that Eastleigh wants to keep as part of the proposed TRO. What justification can there possibly be to keep the double yellow lines if the statement of reasons do not make sense? Recently, the single yellow lines have been removed following an experimental TRO that was deemed to not have been legally enforceable, as the measurements of the single yellow lines have not been added to the order. The experimental TRO costed over £9,500. There are currently over 100 TROs in Eastleigh. The amount of money spent is therefore huge, and if each TRO has been enforced with the same lack of care and due diligence with regards to the reason for having one, there are no doubt but a huge waste of money spent by Eastleigh Borough Council. I also wish to raise the matter of the 7 white H bars on Upper St Helens Road. Despite being told they were not part of the original experimental TRO, they only first feature and were only first mentioned on the plans of the experimental TRO, and were only painted at the same time as the single lines of the experimental TRO. I've been told it is not cost effective to remove them, yet residents, if they know that they can, which I do believe not, as they have not been informed, can request removal. However, if they were not requested in the first place by each and every resident, how was it cost effective to paint them at all? The government recognised in 2010 that street clutter affects people's well-being and wrote to every council asking them to reduce street clutter. Why is Eastleigh doing the opposite in trying to enforce TROs with reasons with no logic or evidence? Its own reports disagree with the reasons given. Finally, because of the double yellow lines, people now park on the grass verges, both damaging them and blocking pavement access for pedestrians. This did not happen prior to the double yellow lines. Given the fact during COVID-19 more people are walking and are being encouraged to walk, by encouraging and allowing grass verge parking, you're preventing people from being able to socially distance as they walk down the footway if a car is in the road, or walk in the road, causing a safety issue. If the proposed TRO is enforced as mentioned previously, we will collectively take legal action against EBC through judicial review. I'll now read the second objection. This is from Mrs. Baker. Eastleigh Borough Council, EBC, will decide on whether to keep the double yellow lines proposed TRO on the 15th of June 2020. We believe the lines are unnecessary for the following reasons. Number 1, EBC's statement of reasons for the proposed TRO gives 3 reasons which are false. The first says the double yellow lines are to protect safety, yet the January 2020 report by EBC says that there have been no accidents in the last 5 years due to parking. The second says to protect flow of traffic, yet there has never been any complaints about the flow of traffic either by bus companies or the emergency services. The final reason states to protect amenities, yet there are no nearby amenities. In 2010, the UK government wrote to all councils asking them to reduce street clutter, stating that the unnecessary street clutter is detrimental to people's well-being. We hope you agree it's much nicer to walk down a road with no unnecessary lines or street posts or signs. Number 3, the experimental TRO on Upper St Helens Road, recently retracted, cost over £9,500. The no waiting signposts after 18 months have recently been cut down, were deemed both unnecessary and unlawful due to the original order being incorrectly written, wasting residents' council tax. And the final objection is from Ms. C. Taylor. My objections to the yellow lines are as follows. It encourages traffic to race through the road as a shortcut to its destination. Delivery drivers need to park outside the property they are delivering heavy goods to and sometimes have to park on the yellow lines. Secondly, encourages parking on pavements and grass verges. What you should be doing is enforcing the rule that you do not park on the pavement or grass verges. How can people pass their driving tests when they don't know how to park properly? I see all of this from my kitchen window, which faces the road, and on my daily walk. I have lived here from 1981 and I do feel my views should count. Thank you, Chair. They're all the statements of objection.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. And I believe now we have statements from 3 residents who are actually in support of the double yellow lines. If you could read those, please.
Certainly. Sorry, just bear with me a second.
That's okay.
Thank you. The first support letter is from Mr. Poor. My name is Edward Poor. I live at 47B Upper St Helens Road, just below the junction of Stockholm Drive. Sorry. I'd like to express my appreciation of the parking restrictions currently active at Upper St Helens Road. Before the double yellow lines were added, we constantly had vehicles parked outside our property. This posed a problem in exiting our premises due to the view of oncoming traffic being blocked. Stockholm Drive becomes completely blocked from view, so that any car exiting Stockholm Drive cannot see us and we can't see them. A number of near misses have been encountered. So although it causes some inconvenience for our visitors who would prefer to park there, we feel the safety aspect is more important. I think that as most of the properties have driveways to accommodate several cars, it surely isn't a problem. I'm sure short stay delivery vehicles would not be penalised for stopping in these spots for offloading. I thought it had been agreed at the local council meeting back in January that we would be retaining the new yellow lines. I therefore submit a request once more for the retention of the current double yellow lines that currently exist outside my property. Thank you, Mr. Edward Poor. The second is we are in favour and would like you to pass the proposal to keep double yellow lines from Lions Place to 47B Upper St Helens Road. Our reasons are to avoid all-day parking by commercial vehicles owned by a company in Totton who leave their vans and cars outside all day, sometimes from as early as 5 AM, and then travel onward in 1 or 2 vehicles. When collected, these vans have been replaced by other commercial vehicles that residents bring home from their place of work and leave overnight. These vehicles obstruct our sight lines when exiting from our drive and also poor vision from those turning right from Stockholm Drive onto Upper St Helens. Many thanks, Mr. and Mrs. Pomeroy. And the final support statement is from a Mr. B. Elliott. Dear Committee, I have lived in Upper St Helens since 1977 and have witnessed many changes to the traffic volumes in said road. The predominant problem has been inconsiderate parking by mainly contractors' vans who leave the vans for the whole day before returning in the evening to collect them. The other issue was that they would arrive at 6 AM in the morning, slamming doors and transferring tools to the annoyance of residents, especially those of us who are light sleepers. This issue also caused a lot of problems for households who could not park their cars outside their own homes and for visitors. Since the installation of double yellow lines, the problem has not occurred and all is peaceful. People now park in their driveways and not on the road, which makes it safer when entering and exiting premises. The only issue now is the speed of some cars travelling up and down the road around rush hour time, which obviously has decreased lately due to the lack of movement of cars since March. We need a 30-mile-an-hour sign in the road, as there used to be many years ago outside number 25, which for some reason was taken down. Over the years, there have been lots of problems with buses and lorries not being able to pass by cars that have been parked inconsiderately at the entrance to Upper St Helens and further down the road, with horns being sounded in frustration at not being able to continue their journey. Again, the double yellow lines have cured that problem. I would like to register my support for leaving things as they are now with regard to the double yellow lines, as since with the removal of the single lines and no waiting sign, it has improved the availability of parking spaces for the narrow end of Upper St Helens Road. Why spend more taxpayers' money when it's going to be needed elsewhere in the future? Kind regards, Mr. Elliott, and that's number 34 Upper St Helens Road. Thank you, Chair. They're all the statements of support. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Siobhan. And I'd just like to thank the members of the public who actually sent in those written statements. Thank you very much indeed. Barbara, would you like to come back on any of the issues that have been raised, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think most of it's been covered in the report. However, I do have one or two points that I'd just like to clarify. So there was a statement about the accidents. The report in last January's committee said there were no recorded injury accidents within the 5-year period, which cited parked cars as a causal factor. There was one recorded injury accident, but it's to clarify that parked cars weren't recorded as a factor in the cause of that accident. With regards to the bar markings that were marked in between the single yellow lines, residents of the properties that had the bar markings have all been asked individually if they wish for the bar marking to be removed or retained. And works to remove those bar markings, should residents so wish, have either been carried out already or will be done when the future road marking works are carried out in the vicinity once this committee has made its decision. With regard to sign clutter, Hampshire Highways and Eastleigh Borough Council, as its agent, are committed to reducing unnecessary sign clutter on the highway wherever possible. Sometimes signs and lines are necessary to indicate what the restrictions are, but we will always aim to install them in such a way as that they are least visually intrusive as possible. There was another comment about people parking on the footways and grass verges behind the yellow line, so to speak. The yellow line restrictions actually apply from the centre of the carriageway to the edge of the highway, so that can be enforced if people are parked behind the yellow lines. Of course, at the moment the experimental TRO has expired, so they cannot be enforced, but once the decision is made, any yellow lines that are retained, there will be an order to cover those, and they will be enforceable as before. And there was, in the supporting comments, there was a resident who asked about the speed limit sign. If residents are concerned about the speed of traffic, they could consider forming a community speed watch group, and details are available from Hampshire Constabulary, details on their website. And Upper St Helens Road is 30 miles an hour by virtue of a system of street lighting. It's unlawful to place a 30-mile-an-hour repeater sign on a road that has a system of street lighting, and if there was a sign, such a sign in the past, it was either placed there in error or the road didn't have a system of street lighting at that time, which in the 70s or 80s is quite likely. And we've had no reports that I've been able to find from bus companies or freight companies about difficulties travelling along Upper St Helens. I think the last one about residents leaving driveways, we would encourage residents to reverse in and drive out of their driveways. That's what's recommended by the Highway Code. It is generally an easier manoeuvre and is safer because the driver can see the road much sooner than if they're reversing. And those are all my comments in response to those statements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you for responding to residents' comments and questions. We will now move to councillors and ask them if they have any questions for Barbara, please. Nobody any questions for Barbara? Right, okay then. So actually I have a question, Barbara. Can I just confirm that it says in your report that this will be reviewed in 6 months' time? Does that form part of your report?
Yes, Chair, that was agreed at the January committee. that once the committee has made a decision on the restrictions that are currently up for debate and a decision, once those are imposed, then 6 months after that, we will be seeking to review all of the weighting restrictions, including the ones that were introduced in 2017.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I just wanted clarification on that. Right, before we go for debate, I will ask for someone to move the recommendation, please, as set out in Barbara's report. Do I have a proposer for the recommendation, please? Councillor Rupert Curl, seconder. Councillor Lucy Jerd, thank you. Right, I will now open it up to debate. Members, comments, please, if you have any. Councillor House, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who was reportedly quoted as saying that you can't please all the people all the time, or words to that effect. And I think if we had a definition of that phrase in Eastleigh, certainly in Hedge End, it would be Upper St Helens Road that would define, because you certainly can't please all the people all the time. We're lucky if we can please any of the people any of the time. And I think the report that we've had before us this evening rather illustrates the point that there are very different strongly held views on Upper St Helens Road, from people who want to have lots of restrictions to people who want some restrictions to others who want no restrictions, and there is absolutely no consensus on this. What I think has happened over the course of the last few months is that the fact that we said we'd put an experimental order in and we would review the effects of the changes to that order after 6 months has meant that most people have been prepared to say, OK, well, let's see what happens. And then we will take a review and see whether it's worked, whether we need to make any more changes or whatever on the basis of objective analysis of the facts. And I think that's right. And so I think it is right that we agree these recommendations this evening. I've certainly noticed that my post bag, which is now almost exclusively an email bag, has gone down on this issue over the course of the last few weeks, mainly because we have taken a view that we're prepared to review this when we can see what happens. I noticed that we've had a lengthy letter from read this evening, which I think is right. He's expressed views repeatedly. In fact, I had 13 emails over the course of the last 2 weeks alone on this issue, but I haven't had that many others, and that tends to me to again validate the consensus that's emerged, which is that it is better to see what happens as a result of the regulations that we're proposing here. It is clear to most people, I think, that a footway and a verge is an amenity. The verge is very valued in many cases. It's why we get so many objections when people park on verges. The footway very clearly is an amenity for people to walk along. We've had reference to H-bars. They, of course, are advisory, and most people respect them because common sense says the H-bar is there for some reason. But we'll see over time. I think on balance, we've got the best of the options that are available to us at the moment. So that's the basis on which I'm very happy to support the recommendations that are in front of this committee this evening, and clearly on the basis that we will review them 6 months after they've been implemented. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Does anyone else wish to speak on this traffic regulation order? No? OK, I have to say I completely agree with Councillor House comments. Upper St Helens Road has TRO has always been a contentious issue, and having it as an experimental order was a good idea, obviously, to receive feedback from residents as to what they thought. And as this recommendation states, that it will be reviewed again in 6 months' time. So if there are no other comments or any other debate, I will now go to a vote. Laura, could you carry out the roll call, please?
Of course I can, Chair. As Councillor Asman arrived partway through the presentation, just to be clear, she can't vote on this item. So Councillor Bearder?
Agree.
Councillor Corbyn?
Agree.
Councillor Garton?
Agree.
Councillor Gomer?
Agree.
Councillor House?
Agree.
Councillor Jerd?
Agree.
Councillor Curl?
Agree.
Councillor Pretty?
Happy to agree.
Councillor Tennant?
Agree.
Councillor Trace?
Agreed.
Thank you, councillors. Chair of the councillors that can vote, that was unanimous.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you, councillors. Right, we will now move on to item 11, which is presentation of the planning guidelines. And this is again a pre-recorded presentation, councillors, so please bear with us. Thank you.
In this short presentation, I would like to briefly run through some key points in relation to the planning process to assist councillors in determining the planning applications on the agenda tonight.
Apologies, Chair, we just seem to be having a few technical difficulties. We'll get there in a second.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura.
In this short presentation, I would briefly run through some key points in relation to the planning process to assist councillors in determining the planning applications on the agenda tonight. The starting point for determining any planning application is that a proposal can only be considered on planning grounds and must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. At present, the development plan for Eastleigh Borough Council comprises the saved policies of the 2001 to 2011 adopted local plan and, where applicable, the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. The committee report for each application will refer to the Minerals and Waste Plan if it is relevant to that application. The Council has prepared a replacement for the adopted local plan, which covers the period of 2016 to 2036. This plan has been through the examination process and the inspector's post-hearing advice was received in April. Where there are specific policies relevant to a site, the committee report provides an indication of the weight that may be given to those policies. The report will also advise on the weight to be given to the submitted local plan in general. Other documents that may be of relevance include supplementary planning documents, or SPDs, which are adopted by the Council and provide more detailed guidance on specific matters. Guidance and policy published by government is also relevant. In particular, the National Planning Policy Framework, or the NPPF, is a significant material planning consideration. The NPPF sets out key planning requirements, seeking to ensure that planning decisions deliver sustainable development. The guidance recognises that there are different components to sustainability which interlink. For applications proposing larger scale development, the committee report will cover each of these three strands separately. Other material considerations that may be relevant to an application can include, for example, the planning history, both on a site or nearby, appeal decisions made by the planning inspectorate, and case law where decisions have been taken through the courts. Site-specific matters such as residential amenity, infrastructure and ecology are also significant considerations. There are some matters that are frequently raised that cannot be considered within the planning process. These include devaluation of property, civil matters such as boundary disputes, and matters that are covered by other legislation. As councillors are aware, there are a number of different types of planning applications, which can be identified by the letter prefix in the planning reference. Of these, a local area committee will typically deal with 3 types of applications. These are full, outline, and reserved matters applications. Full applications have all the detailed information necessary to determine whether a proposal is acceptable, submitted in a single application as a one-step process. A 2-stage process allows for outline and reserved matters applications to be submitted. The outline application seeks to provide sufficient information to determine whether the principle of development is acceptable and may potentially include some detailed matters. This is then followed by a reserved matters application or multiple applications at a later date to deal with the details not approved at outline. Typically, where planning permission is granted, conditions are imposed, which may require further information to be submitted, or may require certain details or measures set out in the documents supporting the application to be complied with. Where more information is needed, 1 or more discharge of condition applications will be submitted to the local planning authority. Where conditions are imposed, they must meet the 6 tests set out in legislation. This concludes the planning guidelines presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kitty. That was presented by Kitty Budden, one of our principal planning officers. The next item is item 12, and that is the planning application land to the north and east of Botley Green, Winchester Road, Botley, as written on the agenda. And I will again remind councillors that they must be present for the duration of the item in order to be able to vote. So I will now ask Liz Harrison, another of our principal planning officers, to present the report, please. Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, good evening. I'm Liz Harrison, and as Councillor Garton's just said, I'm one of the principal planning officers. I will be just about to play the pre-recorded presentation for this item, but after which I do have a few verbal updates which I'd like to come back with afterwards.
Thank you, Liz.
Apologies, just one moment. Thank you, Chair. This is the presentation for planning application F/19/86233 for the proposed local centre at Botley Park. Before I start, I should explain that due to the shape of the site, the orientation of the plans has been changed on the following slides so that north is to the left of the screen. The site is located to the south of the new roundabout that provides access into the Botley Park development, to the east of Winchester Road and to the north of Botley Park Hotel and Spa. The existing Braxall's farmhouse and former employment units can be seen in the middle of the site, and these are proposed to be demolished. The aerial photo shows the site in a bit more detail. The trees on the boundary with Winchester Road are to be retained, and the trees within the site, running between the existing buildings and the hotel, are to be removed. I'll now go through some photographs of the site. This is the site viewed from Winchester Road looking north at the entrance to the hotel. The access to the southern part of the proposed development will be via a new access off this hotel access road, beyond the new footpath cycleway that can be seen in the photograph. This series of photographs is taken from Winchester Road looking southeast towards the proposed local centre, with the roundabout and Kingsman Drive to the left of the photo. As you can see, the site slopes up from Winchester Road towards the knoll to the east of the site. The trees that can be seen in the distance
Sorry, Liz, I asked you to mute because there was background noise, but it's actually muted the presentation. Can you go back to the photos of the site and start the slides from there?
The photos of the site?
Yeah, where you've got the three together with the views, I think, from Winchester Road, I think it is. So they get the councillors get the complete presentation. Sorry, it's my fault.
This series of photographs is taken from Winchester Road, looking south-east towards the proposed local centre, with the roundabout and Kingsman Drive to the left of the photo. As you can see, the site slopes up from Winchester Road towards the knoll to the east of the site. The trees that can be seen in the distance in the centre are those on the knoll and are unaffected by the proposals. The line of houses with slate roofs facing the site are those on Dollery Close. The low-level buildings towards the right of the photo are the vacant Braxall's Farm employment units, and the single-storey brick building with black doors adjacent to the footpath is a new substation. These photos were taken from the corner of Dollery Close and Kingsman Drive, looking southwest towards the site. The dwellings on the left-hand side of the photo are those in Dollery Close, with the Braxall's Farm units in the centre and Winchester Road on the right-hand side. As members will recall, and as set out in the committee report, a previous Reserve Matters application was considered by HEWEB Local Area Committee in May 2017. It proposed a convenience food store and 2 retail units at the northern end of the site, 4 light industrial units, the retention of the existing Braxall's Farm employment units, and the conversion of the farmhouse for employment use in the centre of the site, and a block of 68 units of older persons accommodation at the southern end. Members resolved to defer determining the application so further consideration could be given to the mix of uses, the relationship between them, and the means of access to the local centre. Following on from members' consideration of the previous scheme, the proposals for the local centre have been reconsidered. The proposals now consist of 1 building at the northern end of the site containing the convenience food store and 2 retail units with 9 flats above. The remainder of the site is now proposed for residential use with a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bed units in the form of houses and flats. Originally, 68 units were proposed, but the amended plans have reduced this to 67 units. In addition, the application originally proposed a flexible A1, A2 and A3 use for the 2 smaller retail units, but the proposal for an A3 use has been removed and now only A1 shops and A2 financial and professional services are proposed. The existing Braxall Farm units are proposed to be demolished and no replacement employment floor space is included in this revised scheme. As can be seen, 2 accesses are proposed to the site. The existing Braxall's Farm access will serve the northern part of the site for the commercial units and 33 of the residential units. A second access will be created off the hotel access road to serve the remaining 27 units. This slide shows the proposed landscaping scheme, and I've highlighted a few key parts. Firstly, the landscaping in the north-eastern corner, the left-hand side of the screen, that will provide a landscaped setting for the local centre and help to filter views of the buildings from some properties in Dollery Close. Secondly, an enclosed area of outdoor space for the flats above the commercial units, which will provide an amenity space for those residents and help to screen some views of the delivery area from the northeast. Then there is the rising land between the built development and the knoll, which is proposed to be landscaped. And finally, the layout of the flats at the southern end of the site has been redesigned to provide a central landscaped amenity space for these residents. The next few slides show some of the key elevations within the proposal. The elevation at the top of this slide shows the front of the building containing the commercial units with the flats above, as would be seen when approaching the roundabout from the north. The smaller elevation is the side return of the building facing Winchester Road. The street scene at the top of the slide starts with that side elevation of the commercial building we've just seen, and then continues along the access road that runs parallel with Winchester Road, showing the residential properties that would face west towards Winchester Road. This street scene then continues along the middle row, showing the flats that would be sited to the right of the existing Braxall's Farm access. The three-storey block of flats to the right of this middle street seam is actually set further back into the site than the other units shown, at a distance of over 40 metres from Winchester Street. The final section of this street scene is shown at the bottom of the slide, with the block of flats that are lighter in colour being a repeat of those shown at the end of the street scene above. As was shown on the layout, all these units are set back at least 15 to 30 metres from Winchester Road, apart from the block just mentioned previously that is set back 40 metres, and the majority of the units are behind the line of mature trees that are to be retained. This slide shows two of the internal street scenes proposed, looking northwards on the two roads that run west to east through the site, or from the bottom to the top on the layout as orientated in these slides. As can be seen in these street scenes, the site generally slopes up from Winchester Road through the site before the land rises steeply towards the knoll. As such, the knoll prevents any long distance views of the local centre site from the east. At the time of pre-recording this presentation, there are two updates. Firstly, the County Flood and Water team have commented on the additional drainage information and confirmed that they now only require a condition relating to the future maintenance of the surface water drainage system, as their other comments have been addressed by this additional information. Secondly, a slight amendment is proposed to the wording of condition 16 to ensure that any required acoustic construction details between the commercial units and the flats above are implemented prior to occupation. All relevant issues have been discussed in detail in the committee report, but in summary, the key issues are that the principle of development is acceptable, the local centre site forms a key part of the wider Botley Park development, the loss of employment floor space is acknowledged, but it is considered that it can be appropriately mitigated with a financial contribution towards off-site employment provision elsewhere in the borough. Hampshire County Council as Highways Authority have considered the proposed access points and found them to be acceptable, concluding that they would not have an adverse impact on highway safety. And while some further revisions are required elsewhere within the layout, these are relatively minor, and with these it is considered that the scheme would meet the council standards and would not be detrimental to the surrounding area. Subject to the slight amendment to condition 16, as referred to earlier, the recommendation is as set out in the report for the outstanding matters and completion of the Section 106 legal agreement to be delegated to officers to resolve, and then for permission to be granted, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to add something, Liz?
Yes, if possible, could I just, I've got a couple more updates which have occurred since that presentation was recorded. The applicant has submitted a revised noise assessment to now include the assessment of the impact on the existing neighbours. You'll note that that was mentioned in the report as something that had been requested but not yet received. That has now been considered by Environmental Health, and they concluded that while the proposals would have an impact on the existing residents, appropriate mitigation can be secured via condition. And then secondly, they've also submitted some further information with regard to the need for employment land in the borough. That is currently being considered by economic development, but there is no change to the recommendation before you tonight. And then finally, just two further conditions to be added to the recommendation. The first being that no external shutters are to be installed on the commercial units without prior approval of the local authority. And secondly, that any required tree pit details for the landscaping scheme are to be submitted and approved. Thank you, Chair. I've got no further updates.
Thank you very much for that, Liz. It's very informative. Thank you. Right. We do have some members of the public who have registered to speak on this item. Some members of the public are actually going to speak live, which is really good. So, but the first one, I'm going to ask Siobhan to read out a written statement, please, from James Turner objecting to the development. Siobhan.
Thank you, Chair. A statement from Mr. James Turner. The following objections to the plan that I would like to appreciate being considered are: loss of privacy. The proposed residential units are 3 stories or on top of retail units, which will give them a direct line of sight into our house and the houses of my neighbours who are currently at the front of the development. Adequacy of parking. Any overflow to the retail units are likely to come to the first available place, which will be our road, causing increased difficulty getting in and out of an already tight road. Traffic. The resultant increased traffic will be dangerous for children and other residents and damage the local environment. I can't see any way this would be avoided if the development was to go ahead. Disturbance. Firstly, the construction of these will cause lots of noise and dust. The dust will mean it will not be possible to dry washing outside and affect children's ability to play outside if it is complete. There will be a lot of noise at all hours from the resulting retail units. Loss of recreation space. The grass area where the development is proposed is used by children and dog walkers, and loss of this open space will be a shame, especially for those unable to drive. Financial loss. If the proposed units are built, it will really affect the appearance of the development, making it a less desirable place to live and affect any sell on value. Kind regards, James Taylor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Unfortunately, we only just heard you. We couldn't get you live on camera, but I think everyone heard that written statement from James Turner. Right, as I said, we do have some residents who are going to participate live, and I'd like to welcome them to our meeting. The first one speaking in objection is Lauren Udall. Can I just say that you will have 3 minutes.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask a question? Can I just check, can all councillors, just because the internet appears to be really busy, which I couldn't get Siobhan live, I know we've asked some councillors to turn their cameras off, but if your cameras aren't off, councillors, can I ask that all of you turn your camera off, please? Apart from Cynthia, because obviously I need to flick back and forth to you if your cameras aren't currently off. Thank you. Sorry, Lauren, I will send you live now.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Lauren Udall. I am a resident of the Botley Park development. I would like to point out that the plans submitted impact heavily on the development, impact heavily on the appearance of the current main entrance to the estate. They're different to the original proposals and do not provide a positive social or sustainable impact on the area. This semi-rural development was planned initially with open space and local living in mind, and the new additions do not cater for these attributes. People were drawn to the development due to the open spaces, parkland, the primary school and walking routes. Additional overdevelopment on greenfield elements do not sit well with the community as a whole. Whilst local amenities will assist with local economic growth, sustainable living and simplicity of life, excessive overdevelopment, more housing on greenfield space and encouragement of traffic movement and removal of trees does not. As a community, it would be lovely to see a local shop, cafe, hairdresser, takeaway, pharmacy, etc., all of which people would use and support. A prime example of this is the growth of the historically failing local pub, which until the recent COVID-19 outbreak has seen exponential growth and contributed to community life greatly and positively. All of these small businesses or convenience store operations could be built on the site of the old farmhouse and small business park. There is, since the COVID-19 situation has occurred, a clear national government drive to live more sustainably and encourage people to shop local and cycle or walk to work and shop. This has been so successful and there should be no reason why it could not continue and be supported by an already large community it would only exceed. My sadness as a resident is that there's no focus or urgency on the consortium of developers to support parks, open spaces, parkland, woodland walks that we were all promised at the outset of our journey to live here. I'm a mother of young children and we deliberately accepted a tiny garden in our 4-bedroom home as a compromise in the knowledge that our children could play outside, get to school safely, and that there would be a field at the front of the estate and parks for our children to play in. The additional local One Horton Heath development will provide more housing for the borough. Why should the people who purchased in Botley lose our open spaces for extra housing in this location? As a professional surveyor with experience of commercial development and retail-led regeneration, it seems to me that these new plans only support the house builders and do not support the community. I cannot support this overdevelopment on greenfield sites. However, I stand with the majority of the community in my support for local amenities built on the already brownfield employment uses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for your comments. Thank you. We now move to Richard Sims, who I believe is another resident on the development, who is also objecting to the proposed application. I say, Richard, there again, you will have 3 minutes. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I have made an objection to this in writing previously, and I don't know whether you've got access to that, but it's dated the 5th of November 2019, and I'm basically going to reiterate the points that were made on that objection. That objection was based on the Eastleigh Borough Council Local Plan Review 2001 to 2011, which I looked at online, and I felt that there are quite a few aspects of this development which fall foul of the points in that document. So as we previously mentioned, I'm a resident of the development. I live on Dollery Close, approximately 35 metres from the convenience store location. Dollery Close is a road with houses from 3-bedroom to 5-bedroom, and they are going to be overlooked by the convenience store and the other properties on this development, mainly based on the fact that the site is actually higher than the sites where we live. So any development will overlook us. The original plan was, as you know, for an old people's home, and the convenience store had only one level, I believe. It didn't have any flats above it. So when we bought our house, we were of the view that we wouldn't be overlooked, but it seems as though the plan has now changed to a plan where we would be overlooked. And also bearing in mind that the number of plots has seemed to have gone down by 1, I believe. There is going to be still a lot more people that will have cars, because I expect that there would have been a lot less people driving in the old people's home than there would be now in these flats. So if going back over my previous objection, I looked at the poor design, layout and appearance, section 59BE, which states that the development must take full and proper account of the context of the site, including the character, the appearance of the locality or neighbourhood, and are appropriate in mass scale, materials, layout, design, density, siting. This is a large scale development on a small plot of land, and it now has obviously a large commercial building, a lot larger than the proposed convenience store that was in the initial plans. There's 5 blocks of flats in this small area proposed, and a number of small houses, mostly 2-3-bedroom houses, which doesn't really seem to fit with the context of the site around it. As I've mentioned, there's the issue with the elevation, the fact that they will sit higher than the houses on Dollery Close in any event. It just doesn't seem to take into account the appearance of the houses around the current site. I'm also concerned about excessive noise. Section 59BE.7 requires that a proposal takes into account the locality and avoid unduly interfering and disturbing or conflicting with adjoining nearby uses, especially in terms of noise, fumes, dust, and overlooking. As I've said, we're 35 metres away from the commercial building. 24 acoustics noise impact assessment refers to a number of mitigating points to be taken into account when considering this, including limited delivery times for HGVs and small transit-sized deliveries, a heavy rubber matting, provisions for mechanical ventilation to habitable rooms to affected by noise. These are things that obviously I would like to see taken into account as conditions in this if it were to go ahead. But I think we need to bear in mind that none of the houses along Dollery Close have any of the types of...
Excuse me, Richard, could I ask you to sum up, please? You're just over your 3 minutes now, thank you.
Sorry. So effectively, concerned about the noise, we don't have the windows that have the acoustic, technical acoustic points that are raised in this report. We're quite close, a lot more people, a lot more cars, car parking design doesn't take into account the fact that there's a number of unmarked spaces that go alongside Dollery Close. I think there's 12 spaces, but 9 flats, and most of those flats above the convenience store are 2-bed. So there's not sufficient parking for those. Most houses will have 2 cars, and that will be insufficient, meaning they'll park down Dollery Close, which was mentioned by James's point before in the statement that was read out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you once again for being able to join us this evening. Thank you. We'll now move on to Nathan Thompson, who I believe is also a resident and is objecting to the proposed application. Nathan, there again, 3 minutes, please. Over to you. Thank you.
Nathan, you're muted.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah, so I object to the plans, as do all of my neighbours on Dollery Close. Dollery Close has 9 houses, which will be overlooked by the new development, which is very much different to what was proposed when we reserved our house back in February 2017. It's going to be much bigger than our houses, and it's going to dwarf us, and it will result in a loss of privacy. Also, the houses or the flats above the shop will have balconies and French doors facing straight into my bedroom window. As the previous people have said, we're concerned about the noise and disturbance generated during the building works and when roller shutters are in use, when deliveries are made, when the bins are emptied, and when large delivery trolleys are in use by the staff at the back car park. If this was to go ahead, please place a restriction on the opening times, delivery times, the times that the back doors can be used, and times that they can use the bins, etc. If the consortium planned for this development right at the start, why didn't they triple glaze our windows, like the acoustic report has suggested? We're going to be left with windows now that will let the noise in. I'm also worried about the offensive smells generated by any A3, A4, A5, so please restrict this to only A1, A2, with no option for any sort of food. I'd also like to mention that there's a lack of parking when compared to similar local centres, such as Tesco at Townhill Farm, Tesco at St Luke's. There's much less parking here when compared to those sites. Convenience stores often become a place for bored teenagers to gather. What are the developers going to do to stop the youths gathering and causing crime outside the shops? Will they be contributing towards local youth centres? Will the developers be cleaning our windows? Will they be cleaning our gutters? Will they be cleaning our solar panels at the 9 houses in Dollery Close? What will they be doing to block out the noise and muck, like the previous people have asked? I think that's basically it.
Thank you very much, Nathan, and thanks again for joining us this evening.
No
Much
problem.
appreciated to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope you will stay and listen to the debate. Thank you. We now also have a written statement, I believe, from Nigel Jarvis, who is the applicant or from this consortium. So I'll pass over to Siobhan. If you could read Nigel Jarvis' statement, please, Siobhan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. I would like to thank the Planning Officer for her detailed and thorough report and consistent work in assessing this application. I am grateful you will consider this statement. Outline permission for the wider site was achieved by the former owners and consented a housing-led development for 1,400 homes with supporting infrastructure. The consortium are thus far delivering 1,330 homes and the community facilities under other phases. Those include the full site requirement of 420 affordable homes. For this parcel, the outline master plan approved a mixed-use hub comprising retail, employment and assisted living apartments. All these uses ranges from 2 to 3 stories. Our reserve matters based on the master plan were recommended for approval by officers and carefully considered by the HEWEB committee. That application was deferred and HEWEB invited the consortium to consider a different approach, one that developed a gateway retail environment at the main entrance to the development, but avoided segregation of residential communities by the uses, and which may take a different mix, including additional residential. My clients responded positively and briefings with HEWEB and Botley Parish Council followed, along with detailed engagement with officers before and after submission of this new application. We are pleased to have officers' support again for our proposals and are hopeful members will support the scheme. We recognise some reservations persist. These are thoroughly considered by the officers' report, which concludes the proposals are robust and policy compliant. In response to the key points raised, on access, we have undertaken a detailed review of access alternatives as requested. The Braxell's entrance remains the optimum solution. Thorough highway consultant analysis proves it to be safe and fully compatible with the forthcoming second Winchester Road roundabout. There will be a marked reduction in traffic using the using the junction compared with earlier proposals. HCC, Hampshire County Council, endorses its use. There is no specific elderly housing proposed. There were no controls for such under the outline, but the scheme produces a housing mix significantly weighted towards 2-bedroom homes, which also meets the national space standards. The development would be highly attractive to both downsizers and to first-time buyers and offers an alternative and much more affordable choice of property type for buyers, which are not available within the wider development. There is a loss of Braxell's farm floor space, but the market advice demonstrates that there is the right compromise to enable an effective use of the site. Demand for employment space when the original outline permission was granted in 2013 is no longer there. The last tenant vacated in early 2020 and other tenants left throughout 2018-2019. The applicant has taken specialist advice from Savills over a number of years who deemed the location unsuitable for the delivery of office space. The loss of employment would be offset by retail jobs and benefits of securing close to the proposed allocation total of the housing provision. Between the outline permission for the wider site and the neighbouring site on the west of Winchester Road, this area has become the focus of significant housing growth. We hope members will endorse this well-considered scheme, which is well supported with attractive facilities and additional well-designed housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you once again, Siobhan. Thank you. Liz, can I ask if you can come back on any of those points or questions raised by members of the public?
Yes, certainly. I just wanted, there's obviously a lot of the points are discussed in the report. The one point I did want to clarify was there was mention of this proposal building on a greenfield element of the site. Whilst it has been left undeveloped at present, it was always shown on the outline master plan as being proposed for development. It is correct that the proposals and the nature of them have changed from the previous scheme that was brought before members in the earlier committee and this one, but the land was always shown for development. It wasn't an area to be kept open as public open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Anything regarding the points raised by members of the public, or?
Well, with regard to there was mention of parking. I can confirm that the proposals do meet the council's parking standards. So it is considered that appropriate levels of parking have been provided, and it is proposed to.
You've muted yourself, Liz.
Apologies. It is proposed via condition to limit the uses to A1 and A2 only, which was something Mr. Thompson suggested, and that is one of the conditions listed in the committee report. Similarly, there are conditions restricting the hours of use and the hours of delivery. With regard to the noise mitigation, the additional noise assessment that was I mentioned in the update, that has been considered by Environmental Health, and it has been looked at, and you will see from the layout that the properties in Dollery Close are similar to those residential properties to the south of the commercial units, to the right as on the screen as it was orientated, and those units are not required to have acoustic glazing. It is only those units above, directly above the commercial units, that are proposed to have acoustic glazing. There is the units to the south where there is some mitigation measures proposed. That is because of the HGV and delivery lorries that would drive past them as they come in via Braxall's farm, rather than as a result of the delivery yard and that noise. So it is considered that no further mitigation would be required to the properties on Dollery Close, and that a similar approach has been taken in, and similar assessment has been taken of the existing residents and their impact and the proposed residents of the new dwellings that are proposed. So Environment Health have looked at that information and don't consider that any further mitigation measures other than those that are secured by would be secured by the conditions that are proposed is necessary. Just checking if there are any other comments. Oh, with regard to the potential increase in traffic that was mentioned, it is noted in the report that the outline proposals would have included commercial units for retail and employment, as well as the older persons accommodation. And while it's acknowledged that the older persons accommodation would generally result in lower traffic levels, the traffic levels that would have come about from the original levels proposed for employment would have been higher. So in actual fact, this proposal before you now would result in lower traffic levels than the previous proposal that was before you and that was shown on the outline master plan. And with regard to distances, issues of overlooking, obviously the building will be seen by residents in Dollery Close, but it is considered that there is suitable separation distance, even with an increase in levels, to satisfy the council's amenity standards. There is a distance of between 25 and 35 metres separating the properties. 35 metres is the distance between the commercial units and the nearest properties on Dollery Close, and it goes down to 25 metres when you look at plot 23, which is the middle of the units to the south, and how that is to the closest. That's the closest it gets, is the 25 metres, but the ones closest to the retail units are actually 35 metres away. I think that answers all of the points that were raised. Thank you.
That's really good. Thank you very much, Liz, for that. I will now open it up to members for questions only at this stage before we move the recommendation and then go into debate. Do any councillors have any questions for Liz, please? No? No, I don't see anybody on the chat. Oh, right, okay. In that case then, before we go into debate, I will ask a member to move the recommendation. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Curl, you've just come in. Thank you.
Sorry, yes, Councillor Curl, Botley Borough Councillor. Just a couple of questions. In the report, thank you very much indeed, Liz, for updating us on some of the points actually that I was going to raise, because there were some questions I think in the report about some of the issues. Just slightly concerned that with regards to drainage of the site, in the report it says that some of the drainage will go into, I presume, the sewer system or whatever, and some of the drainage will go into a ditch. My concern about the drainage going into the ditch is it doesn't really actually outline whose ditch it is, where the ditch is, who's going to maintain that ditch, and we have had other issues on the site which you are aware of, where we've had ditches that belong to the county or whatever, which the drainage does go into from the site, which isn't then maintained by the county or another landowner. So we're just concerned about potential flooding issues there. It also talks about joining the sewerage system, but it doesn't actually say which system it's joining. So is it joining the new trunk sewer system, or is it joining the existing Botley Green system, which I know the report says that there are capacity issues. What I would definitely want is assurances that Southern Water would be upgrading or putting in whatever the capacity is required to make sure this development does not cause and will not cause any blackwater surcharging issues or flooding issues into the future, given that we have had that issue in Botley Green, as you're probably aware. And also the issue of, I think when we saw the previous application, we were concerned about certain elements not really relating to the rest of the developments. And to be honest with you, I thought that was one of the main objections or concerns that we had as a committee. And yet we've come back with a completely different scheme altogether, where we've now got residential property above retail, which I didn't think we had in the original one. I could be wrong, perhaps you could tell me. And now we're on to into 3-storey blocks of flats as well. I do have, as I say, unfortunately, quite a few questions, I'm afraid, because the report obviously does, it is quite a substantial application. I am also concerned about the ecological and environmental impacts and the loss of the trees. Now, I understand the trees were agreed to outline, albeit I may have objected at that point as well. But I am specifically concerned about the loss of the trees through the middle. It's a shame that some of those couldn't have been retained and being used within the actual development itself, especially the mature oak tree which is there, which has clearly probably been there for a significant period of time. Given if it is a mature oak, potentially, obviously I'm not a tree specialist, but could have been there for 100 years, maybe something like that, if it is a mature oak. So yeah, there are quite a lot of issues, I'm afraid, which I am concerned about. But maybe you could come back with some answers on those points.
Thank you, Councillor Curl.
Thank
Liz.
you, Chair.
Thank you. Liz.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair. Taking the drainage, I can confirm that the new trunk sewer system that was put in to serve this development did take into account the development of this land. So it is intending to connect into the new sewer system and not the existing older system that serves the village of Botley Green. So it's not considered that should be a particular problem. And that connection is something that was anticipated when the new trunk sewer was designed originally. With regard to the surface water runoff, some of it will go into the drainage system for the wider Botley Park development, and some of it will go into the roadside ditch. Now, further detail of this is provided in support of the application, and the County Council Flood and Water team have considered this, and including condition of the ditch, and they are satisfied that it will be able to accommodate this surface flow, and that there'll be no greater runoff than the existing greenfield runoff rate. So then the County Flood and Water team are content with that there is enough capacity for the surface water drainage in the local area, and equally it's considered that the foul drainage can be adequately accommodated within the new trunk sewer. With regard to the previous development, you're correct, the retail unit at that point consisted of one convenience store and then some individual units. They were single story. It did also propose employment units next to that, so closest to the roundabout with the retail. Then in the centre of the scheme was the retention of the existing Braxell's units, but then also new employment units around it. And then closest to the hotel at the southern end of the site was a 3-storey U-shaped block of flats for older persons accommodation. That was in line with the master plan that was approved at the outline stage. There was some discussion at committee, members may recall, with regard to the separation of the older persons accommodation from other residential development within the wider Botley Park scheme, and members resolved at that previous committee to defer making a decision and suggested that the proposals be reconsidered with regard to looking at potentially an alternative mix of uses and an alternative layout to address some of those concerns. So yes, 3-storey blocks of flats are proposed within the development, but they're proposed at the southern end of the site, where previously it was previously proposed to have the older persons accommodation in a 3-storey block. So the 3-storey units are still there, albeit in a broken format of a few different blocks, rather than the one continuous U shape that was previously proposed. Then finally, I think you mentioned the loss of the trees. It is unfortunate that the trees are proposed to be removed. The central group isn't considered to be a particularly high value in terms of trees, apart from the one oak tree. I don't have details of its age, but it is one of the trees within the group that tree officer has raised concerns about its loss. However, he has also said that with the planting of over 100 new trees as part of this proposal, particularly for the local centre site, I don't mean across the wider Botley Park development, there's a significant number of new trees on that section, but for this particular site there are over 100 new trees to be planted, and the tree officer says that if the loss of the tree is accepted, then that is an appropriate level of new planting to mitigate against that. And given the Outline Planning Permission did approve the removal of all of those trees in the centre, whilst this is not a reserve matters application but a full application and therefore not directly linked to the Outline Planning Permission, it is considered that it would be unreasonable, having said at the outline stage that these trees could be removed, it's considered unreasonable to then now come to a different conclusion and say that the application should be refused on the basis of those the loss of those trees. So that's the reason, as set out in the report, that the loss of the trees are accepted on this proposal as well. I think that answers all of the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. Councillor Curl, are you happy with that? Did you have any further questions or?
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. There were issues with regards to bats, and albeit I do understand that some mitigation was that they were going to put some bat boxes up. I am still concerned, in effect, about the environmental impact that the loss of those trees, etc., is going to have. I'm not a tree expert, but 100 trees of a certain size replacing an oak that's been there and the mature tree belt that's been there for a significant period of time is not going to balance out the biodiversity, I'm afraid, that those trees would offer for a substantial period of time. So I do think that there is I'm afraid, ecological loss or deficit there, whilst those 100 trees do establish themselves and are able to balance that out, let alone the carbon that clearly those trees are going to take out of the environment. So, you know, that's the one for members to weigh up themselves, albeit that I appreciate you said it was agreed at outline. But no, those are all my questions at the moment. Can I just say, though, although you may think it might come into debate, I just thought it was really unfortunate that a couple of members, obviously, who spoke were obviously clearly, you know, they had open space in front of where they were living, and obviously that's now being proposed to be developed. But it was always the case, as Liz has outlined, in effect, that it was always going to be somewhere that was due to be developed, which obviously is concerning from a certain perspective, and certainly from people that are now living in Dollery Close.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curl. Right.
Sorry, Chair, could I just come back on one point?
Yes, of course.
Just in relation to the biodiversity enhancement, just to draw councillors' attention to condition 4 in the agenda report, which does include a requirement for a biodiversity mitigation and enhancement plan, and within that it does talk about measures to do with the bats, and also any additional measures required to secure biodiversity net gain across the site. So that is an assessment of the this site as a whole and the proposed development as a whole, and it will be required required to achieve biodiversity net gain. So that is something that would be secured by condition should permission be granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Liz. I don't think we have any further questions from members. So in order to go to debate, I will now ask for someone to move the recommendation, please, as printed in the agenda and also set out in the officer's presentation. May someone move the motion, please? Thank you. Councillor Corbyn, and seconded by Councillor Goma. Right, we will now move to debate, councillors. Thank you. Can I ask any councillor who wishes to speak on this particular item? Councillor Corbyn, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to move this application. I have to say, I think when we looked at this back in 2017, the plans that we had then just weren't good enough, and certainly comments that were made earlier really did enforce that really it didn't really fit in. It was something that was clearly being bolted onto the side of what is a very nice development. I take the points that are made that the grass at the front is going to be built on, but that was always going to be built on, and I think it goes to the point that the member of the public made, Miss Udell, at the beginning when she was saying that developers don't come forward quickly enough with open spaces, public open spaces on site. And I think this is a classic application where again this has not come forward quick enough, so people have got used to the green space, and it's a shame. However, the previous plans that we saw really weren't good enough, and I do take some comfort that the plans that are proposed now are certainly different, but it does seem to fit together now in a slightly more joined up way. Regards to the trees, yeah, I'm not making any comment on that. I think the applicants are fortunate that we're not looking at that tonight. We're going to be looking at a similar application, and clearly we're not looking at this in the same way as we're looking at that one. The permission has already been granted for these, and so that those trees are unfortunately gone. But if the application was coming now, I certainly wouldn't be supporting taking those trees down. But I can't affect that. I was pleased to see the delivery times. There's clearly a lot of time has gone into looking at making sure that the new residents are going to have a decent place to live, and I think this goes really the shop and the units again to making this into a place. At the moment it's a dormitory, and I think this is adding to what's there, and certainly the report has given me enough confidence that the mitigants have been looked at to make sure that that the points raised have been covered. So I'm going to be happy to support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corbyn. We now have Councillor Pretty who wishes to speak. Councillor Pretty.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that the original proposals had their faults and could have had better design. I was very disappointed to see the loss of retail and commercial space, but glad to see that there's now being provision made for some off-site development. More importantly, I was disappointed to see that the accommodation for elderly people had been removed. We seem to forget that there is an elderly population in the area, that not everybody, when they reach a certain age, want to move into a two-storey flat, even if they're downsizing. But having said that, if the application is approved, I would really like the applicant to consider the design and character of their buildings. I've seen developments elsewhere in the borough which have a lot more character, a lot more interest in the design. I think looking at it, we've got houses that are purely brick. We've got blocks of flats that appear to be brick and nothing else. I've seen in my employment days. Blocks like this military bases for the forces, that they've got no character, and I think the residents of the area deserve something better than the bland design that we have here. So if we are minded to approve this, and I suspect I will support it, can we ask the developer to consider putting some design interests and character into the buildings, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pretty. Does anyone else wish to speak on this application, please? As we are in debate at the moment. Yes, Councillor Curl.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rupert Curl from Botley Ward. Obviously, you've heard some of the concerns that I've raised with Liz in the question part of the application process, and I take on board obviously everything that Liz has said. I am concerned about the flats above the retail. I mean, I was always in favour of there being a convenience store in that sort of region, and clearly that was always mooted as being part of the development for Botley Park. And yes, I am in favour of that. We were obviously raising concerns, I believe, about the access to the rear and obviously the storage areas, etc., associated with either the small business elements or indeed the retail elements of that site, and the relationship that it would then have on those other on those existing houses that are already there. And I do now, have those similar concerns, I'm afraid, with how those elements that now sit, given that we have put flats above, or we're proposing to put flats above the retail elements, which wasn't in the original application. I am actually concerned, and Councillor Pretty has just raised it, about the bland design, I'm afraid, and it is uninspiring again. And we've discussed this on various other sites at times, where you suddenly go above one story and suddenly it just turns into a brick monolith. It doesn't have to be like that. And in my view, I totally agree with Councillor Pretty that it shouldn't be like that either. We're looking at building quality places for people to live, quality communities for people to live in, that they want to live there, and that they would recommend other people coming to live there, and that they're proud of where they live, because of the design elements, because of the environment, because of the the place and the community feel that it actually generates. And it is our duty as councillors, I believe, to make sure that we do draw lines where it is necessary to say that we don't believe that actually these conditions or these elements are being met. I do have concerns, which I've raised obviously already, and the residents have raised some concerns themselves, which are absolutely totally correct and totally right for them to do so. And I just don't think it ticks quite as many boxes as I'd like to see ticked, unfortunately. So I'm afraid, on balance, I'm probably not going to support the application this evening, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Curl. Does anyone else? Oh, Councillor House, you wish to join the debate? Thank you. Can we go to that's Councillor House?
Sorry, Chair, it took a little while to unmute my microphone there, I think, because I didn't give you much notice of speaking. Apologies for that. I'll try to learn and do better next time round. I always groan when developers on major developments start off a site by laying out a vast green space and giving the impression to people who they're selling houses to that green space is going to be there forever. And unfortunately, that's what happened with this development, because as has been said during the course of this evening, that green space area was always going to be a local centre. And so to an extent, it may be that some residents have been misled along the way by the fact that this green space has been there now for all the years that development has been taking place, indeed with now many hundreds of homes occupied, and clearly the developers have used that green space to help them sell homes on the development. So we are where we are. This land was always going to be developed for a local centre and also for employment. I think I take the point made by the applicant that the demand for employment land for offices in this location, even if it was strong when the application was lodged back in 2012, has moved on. I suspect actually too, with COVID-19, the demand for office space is going to be further reduced in many locations because more people have now got used to working from home, and that's just a matter of how things have changed. There was a suggestion, as has been said, of developing a retirement home complex on part of the site instead of employment. That was, of course, a 3-storey development. So there have been various iterations of more intensive development on part of this land over the course of the last few years now, and that is something which we've come to accept over that time. Also, elderly accommodation, generally speaking, does work better, I think, if it's close to town and local centres, rather than on a more rural location, which is predominantly for family housing. So on balance, and it is on balance, I think I'll be supporting this application this evening. I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's better than what's gone before it. And I think on that basis, we should move on and accept what's in front of us tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Normally we only allow councillors to speak once in debate, but I've been asked by Councillor Curl if you can come back quickly, and I'm happy for you to come back quickly, Councillor Curl.
Thank you, Chair. My sincere apologies. I had a very long list and we've been going through most of it, but I apologise. I think it was about just the point that had been made about the green open space area and the loss of what people had deemed as being unofficial, as it were, open space. And I was just wondering whether there was any way that we could, because I am concerned about the fact that there is there isn't any formal play provision currently on Botley Park, which I know is part of the phased development and everything else. But clearly, if people do feel there's a lot of pressure with regards to the fact there is a lack of open space provision for people, that actually we try and make sure that there is actually some formal provision there open before this space actually does get hoarded off or whatever, etc., just so that the residents are do have somewhere that they are able to have their children play, etc. I think that would definitely be of a benefit. And just my final point very quickly was whether or not the recommendation could be changed potentially to include ward members, because at the currently at the moment it's just basically chair and vice chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curl. I do have some sympathy with the residents who live there. I mean, that green area is very established, not just for those who live there, but the rest of us who drive around there. But it was always intended to be a retail area and have some development on it. With regards to play areas, we are working very hard as a council to get the play areas there. Unfortunately, some of our consultation has been delayed due to COVID-19, but we will be pushing forward with that. Sorry,
Chair, can we just pause for just 1 second?
Yes.
I just need to consult with the lawyers for just a second. Bear with me just a sec.
Okay. Right, members, we will continue in a moment after consultation. We do have 2 legal officers with us this evening, so we're just obviously consulting with one of them. Once again, can I say how it's been really good? We've been able to use technology and have members of the public speak live at our meeting this evening. Hopefully Laura will be back with us very soon.
Chair, is it okay if I just provide some advice to the committee?
Yes, of course.
Committee, as you are in debate, you are not able to take any heed of any of the comments that are now being posted in the chat from the residents that have already spoken tonight. residents have already been advised that they cannot use the chat function during the meeting when we did the testing with them. So please, can you disregard those comments? You are now in debate and no further comments from residents can be taken into account. And the legal advisors agree with me. We have just had a quick offline conversation.
Thank you very much, Laura. I think I did say at the beginning that once we go into debate, we can't take any more comments or questions from the public. Councillor House, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure that the advice that's been given is absolutely right in terms of the public participation scheme. But I think for the reassurance of the residents who have been typing away furiously in chat over the last 5 minutes because they felt they wanted to get their point across, if they have comments after the meeting that they want to take up with one of the local councillors, Councillor Curl or Councillor Trace, because there will obviously be ongoing issues with this site beyond tonight, then that would be entirely appropriate for them to do so. Because we are all concerned to make sure that we get the play space brought forward just as quickly as possible. It's one of the flaws of the scheme that we didn't think through the phasing of development well enough to get the play space built early on, and there are lots of issues like that that need to be considered quite properly beyond this meeting this evening.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Yes, it is very important. We're not just building a development, we're trying to build a community as well. So yes, I would echo your sentiments about residents speaking to their councillor. Thank you. With regard, Councillor Curl, just coming back to your comment asking for the recommendation to include it being delegated to ward councillors as well. I don't have a problem with that. Will we have a problem with that, adding that in, Laura?
No, as long as you as chair are happy with it and it goes through on the vote and you get a proposer and seconder for the recommendation being changed, not a problem at all. Okay, thank you very much. In that case then, thank you. In that case then, as we don't seem to have any more debate, I see Councillor House has just proposed that we include the recommendation to include delegating to ward councillors as well, and we have a seconder from Councillor Ian Corbyn. Thank you very much. Do we have to vote on that, or can we just vote on the whole of the application, Laura? That is the recommendation as it currently stands, is to delegate to all councillors. So you need to vote on it to test the proposal in that becomes a substantive recommendation. So we'll take a vote now. If that goes through, then that is what goes through. But if it were to fail, then we'd fall back to the recommendation in the report.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. So what we're going to do now is ask councillors to vote on the whole of the recommendations that we have in front of us.
As in the proposed one with the delegation going to all councillors.
Fine. Thank you very much. In that case, then, as there doesn't.
Sorry, can I just ask, was it all councillors or just ward members?
Ward members.
Oh, sorry, ward members. Apologies.
Yeah, ward members.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for the clarification. Right, in that case, as there is no further debate, I will ask councillors to vote on the recommendations as set out on our agenda and as presented by our planning officer this evening, with the addition of the delegation to include ward members. Laura, could you do the roll call, please?
Of course, Chair, and councillors, just as a reminder, you must have been present for the entirety of the item to be eligible to vote for this. So I'll start with Councillor Asman.
Agree.
Councillor Bearder.
Against.
Councillor Corbyn.
Agree.
Councillor Garton.
Agree.
Councillor Goma.
Agree.
Councillor House.
Agree.
Councillor Jerd.
Agree.
Councillor Curl.
Agree.
Councillor Pretty.
Agree.
Councillor Tennant.
Agree.
Councillor Trace.
Against.
Thank you, Chair. That's 2 against and 9 for.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. In that case, then that recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. And thank you once again to all those members of the public that have spoken to us and sent in written statements. At this particular juncture now, I will call for a break for 5 minutes when we will return to commence item 13. Can I ask councillors please to mute their microphones, and we will be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well done.
Cynthia?
Yes.
Weren't we just voting on the amendment to the change on the recommendation?
No. I did actually make it clear to Laura that that could be included in what we were voting on.
Councillors, just to be clear, you are still live. Just because I put the screen up, we're not paused.
Right, Laura, are we everyone back?
I can't see cameras, Chair, but you could just ask everyone to indicate in chat or by putting the camera on that they're back.
Okay, thank you. Right. Right, thank you everyone. I believe everyone is back with us. So we will now continue with item 13, which is planning application for the former home base Hedge End Retail Park, Tollbar Way. Councillor Asman, are you back with us? Sorry. Yes, yes, good, right, okay. So I just remind councillors that they must be present for the duration of this item in order to be able to vote. Sorry, goodness me, what was I drinking in our break? Right, I'll ask Kitty Budden, our Principal Planning Officer, to present the report. Kitty, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kitty Budden, and as the Chair has just said, I'm a Principal Planning Officer at Eastleigh Borough Council, and I'll be presenting this application and the following item for you tonight. I have a pre-recorded presentation for you. My internet connection is a little unstable tonight, so if we do have problems, then I have a colleague lined up to share my presentation in my place. I do have one very small update to provide verbally at the end of the presentation. Members are already aware of it, but the public won't be, so I will just take a moment when the presentation's finished to update on that. So if you'll bear with me for a moment, I will share my report, my presentation now.
Thank you, Kitty.
Agenda item 13 comprises the planning application for extensions and alterations to the former home-based store at Hedge End Retail Park to provide 2 A1 retail units with minor alterations to car parking, provision of associated development such as trolley and cycle shelters, and variation to the wording of a goods restriction condition to enable a wider range of goods to be sold. The application site is outlined in red on the slide, shown in context with the other units in the retail park and the surrounding road network. The wider site is outlined in blue, which denotes land within the applicant's control. The aerial photograph shows some of the surrounding retail and industrial development in the area. Focusing on the application site itself, on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see the unit as it is at present. The right-hand side plan shows a number of the proposed changes, which will be covered in more detail shortly. As councillors are aware, there are 2 related applications for determination this evening. This site plan indicates the relationship between the applications. Application 1, as it is referred to in the documents supporting the application and the committee report, is the application currently for consideration. Application 2 for the tree works and creation of a pocket park is shown in front of the unit to the south. Moving on to some photos of the site, the camera icon indicates the approximate location where the photo was taken from, with the arrow showing the direction of the photo. Bottom left of the slide is the front elevation of the former home base unit. Top left, the rear service yard from the edge of the garden centre boundary, and top right, a photo looking across the customer parking area towards the Pets at Home store from the corner of the building. The application proposes a number of changes to the existing store, which the floor plan indicates. The home-based garden centre area is reduced in size, with extensions to the western part of the building increasing the floor area available for the newly created Unit 1A and incorporating an LGV delivery bay. Unit 1B would retain a garden centre element. A canopy is to be provided at the front of the building, covering the walkway, and a covered trolley bay and customer cycle store are also provided. As you can see from the floor plan, 2 units are to be created. Unit 1A is intended to be occupied by Lidl as a discount food store, and Unit 1B is to be occupied by a general variety store. When the development was originally consented in 1995, a restrictive condition was imposed to restrict the goods sold to bulky goods only. This is a typical condition imposed on out-of-centre retail units to encourage retailers that would normally be located in town centres to remain in those locations, supporting the vitality and viability of the centres. In order to facilitate occupation by Lidl and a general variety goods retailer, this condition needs to be varied. This proposal and the planning implications have been assessed in detail in the committee report, and the proposed conditions numbers 11 and 12 are recommended to reflect this. The proposed elevations plan shows the elevational changes. The key functional changes being the changes to the garden centre and the rear extensions, and the creation of an additional entrance for Unit 1B at the front of the unit. Improved glazing, the addition of the canopy, and new cladding will improve the visual appearance of the building, which is currently run down. In terms of updates to the committee report, since writing it, there have been 2 further submissions from the Community Engagement Organisation acting on behalf of the applicant. The first with approximately 100 online letters of support, the second with 91 letters. These take the same form as the online letters referred to in the committee report. With regards to the conditions, the wording of condition 6, which covers travel plans, is to be amended to secure a revised framework travel plan within 3 months of work commencing, followed by detailed travel plans for each unit prior to occupation. In relation to condition 12, there is a typing error in the report, and all goods needs to be removed from the end of the first sentence. Additional information was requested by the Council's planning policy team in relation to the potential impact of Lidl's Hedge store on the existing Eastleigh store. This has been received. In essence, the Eastleigh Lidl store is not afforded local or national policy protection, as it is itself in an out-of-centre location. Notwithstanding that, confidence can be had with regards to Lidl's commitment to this store, given their position as freehold owners and the recent investment in the store to upgrade and modernise the interior. The representation from Lidl confirms their commitment to the store. Key considerations have been assessed in the committee report, and in the interests of brevity will not be repeated now. The key point is to note that no significant adverse impacts related to planning matters have been identified regarding this application. The recommendation is therefore to grant planning permission, subject to completion of a legal agreement, to secure contributions towards environmental improvements to West End Village Centre and amended conditions as set out in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kitty. Did you want to come back on something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It is a very, very brief update. I mentioned that there had been 2 further submissions from Your Shout, which is the community engagement company acting on behalf of the applicant. On Friday, there was a further submission and that contained 14 letters of support, which again took the form of the letters that are referred to in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kitty. We do have a live, I believe he's representing the applicant from CBRE, Jamie Phillips, who is going to be joining us to make a live statement to members. Jamie, can I just say that you will have 3 minutes, and just to confirm that we will be looking at these applications separately, one for the building and agenda item 4 is for the trees. Thank you. Jamie.
Can you see me? Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors, and thank you for letting me speak tonight. There are 2 applications before you. Application 1 is for the subdivision of the former home-based store into 2 new retail units, and application 2 is for the removal and replacement of trees outside the stores, along with landscaping, biodiversity improvements across the site. If application 2 is turned down tonight, the second unit will remain empty and unused. Despite extensive marketing, we were unable to find a single retailer who wished to keep the store as a single unit. We're delighted that in today's extremely challenging retail market, we've managed to secure 2 retailers who wish to open new stores. While the application for the subdivision of the store has been recommended for approval by your officers, sadly the second application for the tree works has been recommended for refusal. Councillors, I would like to emphasise that this is your decision, and I believe that you have more than sufficient grounds to grant both. There are many much needed economic and environmental benefits that come from both of these applications. The application for the tree works includes a wide range of mitigation measures. We'll plant 19 new native trees, we'll retain 5 mature oak trees outside the store in direct response to your feedback, and this will mean a net gain of 10 trees. Should the tree work application be approved by you tonight, we are also proposing to give £100,000 to Eastleigh Council to put towards your tree planting programme across the borough, and that will benefit areas right across your communities. There will also be a wide package of ecological enhancements across the site. These will include a new pocket park, new bird and bat boxes, deadwood loggers, shrubs, wildflowers, and these will create new wildlife corridors and biodiversity net gain. The application will contribute to economic growth in the borough, with up to 100 new jobs, both full and part-time, being created, which is acutely important right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2 new stores will also improve consumer choice. As you can see in the report pack in front of you, these schemes have widespread support. Not only does West End Parish Council support the scheme, but also there are over 400 letters of support for both applications. Your residents want to see the retail park revitalised. They want to have an increase in consumer choice, and they want the new jobs that these 2 new stores will bring. So councillors, in our opinion, the benefits of granting both applications exceed any harm. If application 2 is turned down tonight, the second unit will remain empty and unused. So I would urge you to give significant weight to the significant benefits that the granting of both applications would bring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jamie. As I did point out, your comments are obviously referring to both applications, but we will be looking at them separately as put out in our agenda. Kitty, did you want to come back on anything?
There's just one point I'd like to come back on, please, Chair.
Yep. Go ahead.
You're absolutely correct, Chair. The 2 applications are being considered separately, so I will, if it's okay, comment on Mr. Phillips' comments on the second application. One thing I did want to draw members' attention to on this application is that conditions 9 and 10, condition 10 relates to the requirement of the units to achieve BREEAM Very Good as a final stage certificate. So the sustainability of the units will be improved. As part of the submission that's been made with regards to BREEAM for this application, there is a requirement to deliver ecological enhancements. So the subdivision and alterations to these units require environmental improvements, ecological enhancements in their own right. Condition 9 relates to the provision of a landscape scheme in order to secure those ecological enhancements should the application that we're considering next be refused. The point to that is the mitigation that's been proposed and has been stated to be intended to address the loss of the trees on the following application. Some of that mitigation is actually required to achieve the BREEAM Very Good certificate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Right, councillors, there again, as I said, I don't want to obviously go on too much about it, but they are two separate applications, and we are looking at planning application number 13. Right, I will now open up to members for questions only. Does any member Councillor Bearder, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Sorry. Can I ask Kitty a question about the trees? Do we know how old they are? And
it's very difficult to actually pin down how old trees are. The methods of finding out, if you're not there when the seed germinates, then you have to chop the tree down to actually work out exactly how old it is. Depending on the conditions that they grow in, depending on years of drought and all of those sorts of things, it can affect how big the tree gets, which you can estimate how old a tree is by looking at how big it is, but it doesn't actually give you a very accurate estimate. Having spoken to our tree consultant, he is of the view that it's likely these trees were part of a woodland, and they could be in the region of 100 years old. They could be older, but as I said, it's very, very difficult to actually say how old a tree is, which is why tree reports, when they're written, they tend to deal with tree life stages rather than actually ages of the trees. So they'll refer to semi-mature or mature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Bearder. As I said, we will be focusing more on the trees on agenda item 14. At the moment, we are looking at planning application for extension and external alterations to Unit 2 times Class A1 units, alterations to the car park layout, variation to permitted range of goods, and associated development. Anyone else would like to speak on this particular application or have any more questions? Yes, Councillor House.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I just thought I'd put a background up of the site viewed purely straight on from the front, which shows both halves of the site. And I think it's just really important that everyone, and I'm sure there are people watching this this meeting this evening. We can't quite see the whites of their eyes as we normally do in our town centre hall. But for those that are watching, it's really important to understand that we're discussing just the retail uses here and not the trees in front of the site. And we'll come to that on the next item. It's also not really surprising that in the current retail environment that the Whole Foods store failed. Sorry, the home-based store failed. The business was clearly in decline for quite some time, and I do appreciate that the agents have spent quite a lot of time and effort trying to remarket the site, both for one unit and then more subsequently for 2 units. Residents have commented over the last few months about what they'd like to see on the site, and clearly what they'd like to see on the site is not necessarily what we have in front of us this evening, but the reality is we as a planning authority have to deal with the application that's in front of us, not what residents would like to see submitted. So suggestions of children's play zones and restaurants and all sorts of other things are just simply not on the table, and we have to consider what's here. I suspect that a little store on the left hand side of this site will be very popular, and I think probably it will help competition with Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer without having a significant impact, stress the word significant impact, on any of our other local centres. Most of the trade will come from the existing Sainsbury's and M&S stores, and therefore that's probably a good thing. And again, it brings another retailer into the area that's not currently represented seriously locally. So far as the second unit is concerned, Clearly we haven't been told what it is, but we know that it's a variety store and we know that it's got a garden centre at the back. There aren't many retailers that fit that mix. So it's something like, I know it's been rumoured but not spoken by the applicant, something like a B&M or something of that nature. So that's the kind of thing I think we need to be thinking about on that site. And again, I think that's a reasonable usage for this site if we want to see it brought back into activity. I noted the agent's comments a few moments ago about the trees and the viability of the site. Well, clearly we'll consider that separately in a while or so's time later this evening. But I do think it's worth putting on the record here, again, because it is important to put these things on the record, that councillors have been lobbied quite hard by the applicant's agent, the lobbying company employed by them. And I'm sure that councillors will take all factors into account, not just the lobbying that's been received over the course of the last week or so since the agenda was published. On balance, I'll support this application this evening because I think getting the retail units, certainly the little unit, potentially the second unit as well, back into use is worth having. I'm not quite sure I accept the economic arguments that have been put forward about the viability of the second site. That's something we may consider in a little while this evening, but that's where my view at the moment in the course of the debate this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. I think we've included your statement in the members and questions from members. So from what I can gather, Councillor, you are moving this recommendation. Am I clear on that?
I apologise, Chair. I've got the process wrong for a second time this evening, and I thought we were debating and there had been silence on questions, but apologies. So yeah, I'll take that as my contribution to the debate.
Thank you. And are you moving the recommendation, Councillor?
I move recommendations as printed, Chair.
Thank you very much. And do I have a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillors, do I have a seconder, please, for the recommendation? And then we can officially go into debate, please.
Councillor Pretty seconded.
Thank you very much. I've just seen that appear on my screen. Right. OK. Right. I'll ask for any further debate from councillors, and I believe I have got Councillor Gomer who wishes to contribute.
Thank you, Chair. So I think these proposals will bring this site back into use and actually make quite a positive contribution to the area. And certainly the correspondence I've received from residents, even outside of what we might politely call the rather contrived cut and paste submissions we received from the lobbying company, seem to support that view that the residents would like to see a little here and potential use of the second unit for something as well. So I appreciate some of the concerns here. Certainly this idea that there will be a traffic impact, I think that's probably a given. But actually outside of the immediate area, lowering the distance people need to travel to their supermarket of choice must actually be a net benefit in terms of traffic and the environment. So I'm not too worried about that. And then the report spends some time discussing this sequential test and whether this out-of-town development could be better sited somewhere else. I concur completely with the report's conclusion that actually this store will serve a different catchment to Eastleigh Town Centre, and so that principle seems quite sound. And I do note this issue in that vein that's raised by ASDA around the impact on areas such as West End High Street. Again, actually, I think the impact there, speaking as a West End member, is likely to be minimal. Because while it is the job of planning to protect the viability of other local centres, it's not the job of planning to suppress that healthy competition. And of course, in West End, if you're familiar with it, actually a visit to ASDA in West End typically doesn't even involve setting foot on the high street. You can drive up behind, pop in, pop out. So actually, I don't think the displacement of those visits is really any great concern. And of course, I welcome the contributions to improving West End Village Centre. So I think based on what we've heard so far and what I understand of this application, I think I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gomer. We have Councillor Pretty who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see this unit being looked at for reinvestment. It's been sadly empty for such a long time and desperately needs to be brought back into economic use. I was disappointed with the online Facebook consultation that the applicant had commissioned. I think the questions and the information was very misleading. It was only leading to support of the proposal, which in hindsight, all the emails I've had over the last 3 weeks have been in support. So I think that was genuine. I think it was sadly lacking in the area of any comments to the contrary. But the bringing back into economic use the units will be very beneficial both to this area. I think Hedge End may suffer a little bit. It's a pity we haven't got a contribution towards the Hedge End town centre as well as West End, but overall I think the application is sound. It looks good. It brings the building back into a modern appearance, and I think I should be inclined to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pretty. Is there any other member that wishes to speak? Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to make the point that I'm certainly going to be supporting the application this evening. I think Lidl is clearly going to be a very good attraction to Hedge End, and along with other retailers that have chosen to come to the borough in Hedge End. We've got TK Maxx, clearly long-standing, Currys, Smith's Toys, and obviously Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, and many others as well. That doesn't mean I'm not concerned about traffic, and I think traffic is covered in the report. The access to this site is busy at busy times. Lots of times it's not busy, but clearly Lidl is going to bring a new dimension to that traffic. So that would really be a concern that I've got to the small almost service road, which is the bottom end of the coming into the Marks and Spencer's car park. Really is a very small junction, and exit out onto Tollbar Way is very busy. But other than that, very pleased to see this site is hopefully going to be used once more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corbyn. Do we have any other councillors who wish to speak in this debate? No, I'm not seeing anybody. Kitty, was there anything you wanted to come back on at all?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So in that case, we will now go to a vote. It has been, the recommendation has been moved and seconded. We've had quite an interesting debate. My conclusions will very much with the other councillors that it will be excellent to see these empty units put back in use. It has been empty for far too long, and will obviously be a great benefit to both the communities in Hedge End and West End. Right, so the recommendation is as set out in the agenda and the officer's presentation to permit subject to those conditions. Laura, can I ask you to do the roll call, please?
Of course, Chair. Councillors, I must remind you that you must have been present for the entirety of the presentation in order to be able to vote. Councillor Asman.
Agree.
Councillor Bearder.
Agree.
Councillor Corbyn.
Agree.
Councillor Garton.
Agree.
Councillor Gomer.
Agree.
Councillor House.
Agree.
Councillor Jed.
Agree.
Councillor Curl.
Agree.
Councillor Pretty.
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant.
Agree.
Councillor Trace.
Agreed.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. Right, we'll now move on to item 14, which is the planning application again for this site. And just to reiterate that this application is for the removal of the existing trees, works to retain trees and replace hard and soft landscaping scheme alterations to the car park. And I will ask Kitty if you could present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
you. As previously, my internet connection is a bit unstable. Hopefully the the presentation will share okay. If there are any problems, then a colleague will share it on my behalf. The update to this report at the end of the presentation is the same as the update I gave on the previous report, so if councillors are happy, I won't reiterate the update.
Thank you, Kitty. Agenda item 14 comprises the planning application for tree works, hard and soft landscaping with the creation of a pocket park, and alterations to the car park layout within the car park at the former home base unit at Hedge Retail Park. The location will already be familiar tonight, as the site outlined in red on the location plan is adjacent to the application site discussed under agenda item 13. The blue line denotes land within the control of the applicant, and the aerial photograph shows the wider context, with the trees that are affected shown in the red oval. When the retail park development was originally constructed, the scheme was designed to retain a number of mature oak trees, which resulted in the staggered building line and the amenity area in front of the home base unit that could be seen on the site plans. The application proposes the removal of 9 of the 14 oak trees within this amenity space. The existing site plan shows the trees to be removed with a red dotted outline, and those to be retained with a dotted green line. The proposed site plan shows the proposed scheme, which can be seen in more detail on the next slide. As can be seen, the trees to be retained are to the east of the site and set in a soft landscape. In the northeast corner, there is a customer cycle store that was considered as part of agenda item 13, and a trolley bay which forms part of this application. Roughly west of the trees is an area to be equipped with a children's play feature, which is the area shown in blue on the plan. Seating and low-level soft landscaping are proposed, together with 6 semi-mature fastigiate oak trees, which has a narrow, compact crown. The proposals shorten the landscaped area, bringing the southern edge closer to the front of the building, allowing for the access road to be moved and additional 6 parking spaces to be created. Moving on to some photos, as with the previous presentation, the camera icon denotes the location that the photo was taken from, and the arrows the direction. The 2 sets of photos on either side of the slide show seasonal photos of roughly the same views. The left-hand photos facing towards the front elevation of the home base unit, and the right-hand photos facing towards the side elevation of the Curry's PC World unit. The next photos are taken from further inside the retail park, with the left-hand photo taken from the car park in front of the Curry's PC World unit, and the right-hand photograph from the Pets at Home store. The front elevation of the home base unit can be seen behind the trees. With regards to updates to the committee report, as mentioned in the PowerPoint for agenda item 13, 2 further submissions from the community engagement organisation acting on behalf of the applicant have been received. The first with approximately 100 online letters of support, and the second with 91. These take the same form as the online letters referred to in the committee report. Key considerations have been assessed in detail in the committee report. Significant harm has been identified with regards to the loss of the trees from a visual and character impact, in relation to ecology and in relation to the range of eco-services provided by these mature trees. The rationale for the removal of the trees has been set out by the applicant, and the potential economic implications related to increased difficulty in leasing Unit 1B and to the wider refurbishment scheme overall has been considered. A range of mitigation has been proposed to seek to address the loss of the oak trees, which includes planting an additional 13 trees across the wider site, and ecological enhancements such as bird and bat boxes,
deadwood loggeries and native planting. The play feature and pocket park had a substantial financial contribution towards the council's borough-wide tree planting scheme, also form part of the mitigation package. However, it is considered that the removal of 9 mature oak trees has not been properly justified, and that the proposed mitigation package is insufficient to mitigate or compensate for the significant detrimental impacts of the loss of these trees. The recommendation is therefore to refuse this planning application as set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kitty, for your presentation. Did you have anything further to add, or is that complete?
No updates to report other than the update I gave on the previous application. If Mr. Phillips is speaking on this application, I'm happy to come back on his points afterwards. If he chooses not to speak, then I can come back when you're ready, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Mr. Phillips, you did actually include comments regarding both applications. Can I therefore presume that you don't want to further speak on this on this application?
I mean, if I can just say a couple of words.
Yes, of course.
So I really just wanted to reiterate the fact that we've owned this site for 15 years. We're incredibly committed to continuing to invest in the area and the community and the site's potential, really. You know, as a result of a pre-app consultation with you and your officers, we've made significant changes to this planning application from how it was originally conceived. We've reduced the number of trees we're proposing to remove and significantly increased a number of the mitigation measures across the site. Kitty's referenced the fact, you know, we are including a £100,000 contribution towards your tree planting scheme. And ultimately, if this application is approved tonight, we can also get a retailer trading into this currently very dilapidated unit, which will contribute towards 100 jobs for the local community. So on the basis of the above, we believe that the committee have sufficient grounds to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. Was there anything there, Kitty, that you needed to come back on or not?
Thank you, Chair. I think I've covered the points in my report and it's for members to consider. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Kitty. Right, now I'll open it up for members for questions only at this particular juncture. Are there any questions from any of the councillors, please? Yes, Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you, Chair. Kitty, can I just ask the 190 letters that we've mentioned, plus the other contacts, how many of those actually said that they were in favour of trees being removed? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. There have been no representations that have said they are in favour of trees being removed. There have been representations that have stated they support the addition of more trees and that they support the ecological enhancements. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got no follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Thank you, Councillor Corbyn. Any other questions that councillors might like to ask? No? Okay. Right. I don't see anyone indicating that they'd like to ask a question. So in that case, then, I will ask for a proposer to move the recommendation as set out in the agenda and the officer's presentation. Can I have someone who would propose to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Corbyn. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gomer. Right, we will now move to debate. Councillor Jerd, thank you.
Hello, hi, evening. I just wanted to say I welcome the fact that following consultation that the developers are proposing to retain 5 of the oak trees, but I am bitterly disappointed that there'll be 9 of the mature oak trees being felled. I have done a bit of research, and apparently it takes about 50 years for an oak tree to reach maturity and actually produce acorns. So given that these trees could be approximately 100 years old, in my view, they are irreplaceable. Even with the financial contribution to the borough tree planting scheme and with the landscaping and planting of native trees, in my view, that does not mitigate against the detrimental loss of the 9 oak trees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jerd. We'll now move to Councillor Bearder, who wishes to speak.
I think the applicants have made a slight error of judgment in listing Your Shout to do its sort of lobbying on this. It's an arm of Thorncliffe Communications, which was involved in lobbying Robert Jenrick recently on behalf of the billionaire Richard Desmond. Now, in that case, Jenrick went on to act unlawfully, and the local authority in question nearly lost £40 million. So when I started getting all of the submissions from residents prompted by Your Shout, I responded to everybody who'd written to me personally, and I asked the question that's already been asked this evening, whether they would actually support the removal of the trees or whether that was a necessary evil. And surprisingly, well, unsurprisingly to me, most of them didn't actually support the removal of trees. One, for example, said, personally, I would prefer the trees to be saved. I'm sure the planners would be able to work around this and have other suggestions up their sleeves, even if it meant fewer parking spaces, for example. So I think if the residents of Eastleigh had been given a fair and balanced appraisal of this, and we'd been lobbied and we'd had a lobbying company working on favour of the trees, then we'd have a different number of emails into our inboxes saying very different things. Everywhere I go, and you guys know I'm also a councillor up in Oxfordshire, we have the massive pressure on the environment, and as Lucy said, these are such important assets, 100 years old, and I certainly can't support removing them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bearder. Councillor Goma.
Thank you, Chair. So I suppose bluntly, I agree with colleagues and with the recommendation in the report that fundamentally the removal of these trees is not environmentally sustainable. The time it will take for the replacement planting even to offset the impact of the initial loss is very significant. As Councillor Jerd says, a replacement tree may not be mature in my lifetime, and I'm the youngest member of the committee. So to be honest, I'm rather surprised to hear that retailers would rather be the ones responsible for felling a significant number of mature, healthy oak trees than being the retailer that uses a unit with some trees in front of it. And I just think it's sad, and probably the attitude that has got us where we find ourselves today, facing a climate change and biodiversity emergency. But you know what? You know, these economic gains we may not get if that unit remains empty. Well, so be it. You know, that potential economic gain is less important than the environmental damage this application would cause. So I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goma. We will now go to Councillor Curl. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Rupert Curl from Botley Ward. Yeah, I was just following on from the comments that other members have made, really, to be honest with you. I see absolutely no justification for removal of these trees whatsoever, actually, and all of the words that other councillors have quite rightly raised, I absolutely agree with. I actually checked myself potentially and asked some questions about the potential age. Kitty is quite right, and so is the tree officer, that you can't really tell unless you cut it down and actually count the rings. And also it does depend on the soil, etc., that it's planted in, all that kind of stuff, as to rate of growth and everything else. But the actual starting point in the tree officer's estimation was probably 100 years, and that would be the starting window. So they're probably 150 to 200 potentially years old, some of those trees there. Given that the mitigation is to plant some trees within the site, and there is a number attached to how many for the ones are being lost. Clearly, has already been stated, it would take a significant period of time before you're able to even just get up to the point where those trees are now, let alone the actual carbon capture, etc., that those trees have been holding on to for a significant period of time and continue to take out pollution out of our atmosphere. They are close to lots of vehicle movements and close to main roads. They are of a significant asset to the wider area, and clearly were held on to as part of the original development plan, I would suggest, as being a condition for them then not to be removed. I'm sure probably some more trees probably around them probably were removed at the time. I cannot also, I'm very much in favour of the previous application. I clearly want to see those units being reused. I think that's going to be clearly great for jobs and the economic sustainability of the area, but clearly not at the expense, I'm afraid, of the assets and the value of these trees. I cannot believe really that a retailer would be that short-sighted that they would say that they would not use a unit because they couldn't put a sign in front of it saying where it is. Those units are not going to, in my view, have passing trade popping in and going, oh look, there's a so-and-so store. They will look for their retailer on their phone and say, where is my local store, as indeed they probably do with Pets at Home, as indeed they do with Curry's PC World, etc., etc., Halfords, all of the other people that are around there. They don't all have road frontage shop windows, and therefore if you were looking for, shall we say, Lidl or B&M or whoever it is, you would look on your phone and say, where is my local B&M? And it would come up and say, oh, it's in Hedge End Retail Park. Oh, I know where that is. I'll just pop in and find it. So there's a nice little sign at the beginning saying there you are, B&M this way. You then find a parking space and walk to B&M, which happens to be behind some very lovely mature oaks, which they could make a feature of, and it could add as being a unique selling point rather than being a downside. So I'm not taken with the argument that it's justified to remove those ancient trees just on the argument that a retailer has said we will not use that store. I just don't believe it, I'm afraid. I'm sure they could use that as a good marketing tool. They could even actually name it the B&M store, the Oaks Hedge End. I don't know. You see the oaks more than you can see the roof. So anyway, I will be voting with the recommendation to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curl. We now move to Councillor Pretty.
Thank you, Chair. I think Rupert's actually covered most of the points I was going to say. Very comprehensive comments there. But I have to say that it seems to me the oak trees were there before the 2 tin sheds were built, the home base and the PC World. It looks very much as though they were built around them. So I see no justification in removing them. The applicant, if they'd carried out sympathetic tree works, could have opened up the vista through the undergrowth and given a better sight line. I think the mitigation argument made by them really doesn't stand up. A couple of years ago we had Pets at Home application which had 4 or 5 trees planted on their site. There's 1 alive, the other 4 are basically dead. Where's the support and maintenance of those? How can we rely on the applicant to maintain any trees they put in around the site? And really native species, I suspect, wouldn't be oak trees, they'd be something quicker growing. So unfortunately, I think, not unfortunately, that's the wrong word, I definitely won't be supporting this proposal, and I will vote for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pretty. Councillor House.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and it's good to finally get this application in front of us. We've talked about it for quite some time, and I too, like everyone else, was subjected to a pretty intense lobbying campaign from the lobbying company employed by the applicants, and I think has been said too, it's probably the most ill-advised lobbying campaign that I've been subjected to as a councillor in over a quarter of a century. So I thought it would be quite interesting just to test public opinion with a pretty neutral question on one of the local Facebook sites, and I was absolutely amazed to find just over 650 comments posted on that site, and the number of people who actively wanted to see the trees removed, I think you could probably count on the fingers of one hand. Now, of course, it's not a popularity contest. Our job as councillors this evening is to consider the application that's in front of us. We have a legal duty to do so. I know residents don't always understand that's the case. Why can't the council just say no, full stop? We have to give proper planning consideration to the issues that are in front of us. And to me, there are a couple of points that really stand out. The first, quite obviously, is that these trees are magnificent. You don't grow 100-plus-year-old oak trees very quickly. And the suggestion that simply throwing £100,000 at the council to perhaps plant maybe 1,000 or so trees somewhere else in the borough, not all of which would survive, would compensate for the loss of these mature specimens, actually I don't think answers the question. And the detailed report from our tree officer and from the ecologists in the committee report, I thought spoke volumes for the issues here. And I read those reports pretty carefully. I'm not an ecologist, I'm not a tree specialist, but it just didn't feel right when I was lobbied to say, well, actually, new trees will soak up more pollutants than old trees. Not right at all. Something was seriously wrong with that. So that's the first point. The second point, which is raised by the developer, we do have to give consideration to, which is the economic impact. And what is the issue about these trees being left in front of something like a B&M store in this location? And I thought that the points that were made by Councillor Curl were absolutely right here. The reality is that most people go to the stores in that area because they know they're there, and they know pretty quickly. And once they're in the car park, they can see what's there, regardless of whether the trees are there. And if it were to be the case that CBRE came back to us with an application in the future to put a decent advertising sign at the front of the site, advertising whatever unit it is to attract passing trade, I suspect we'd be quite sympathetic to that, because we do want to support jobs, we do want to support better retail offer in the Hedge End area, and that would be one way of doing it. It doesn't seem to me that it's necessary to remove the trees to do that. I'm not even convinced that the suggestion of a pocket park is terribly desirable either. You come to this area to shop. You don't come to this area to let your kids out to wander around a park area where there's quite a lot of passing traffic, parking often distracted by the retail environment. So I'm not even sure that's a good idea. What we could do, what we could see, is the area tidied up, walkways put between the two blocks of trees to give access to the new store, and yet see the trees maintained, and that's hinted at in the report too. Rupert rather beat me to it, because I was going to suggest that the feature could be renaming the entire site the Oaks, because that would be a really attractive name for a retail development and something to celebrate rather than something to say, yeah, wasn't it nice? There were some fantastic oak trees here in the past. So I've read the report carefully. I've given proper consideration to the applicant's point of view, but I'm not convinced that we should go anywhere near removing these trees. So I'm happy to support the refusal of removing these trees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor House. Was there anything you wanted to come back on, Kitty, or are you okay?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you. Well, I have to say I agree with all the comments made by councillors this evening. I think the argument for removing the trees is very weak. And as been mentioned about signage, most of our retail parks already have signs at the entrance to show which shops, retail outlets are already situated there. So I'm sure that could be overcome. And I hope that the applicants will take on board some of the suggestions made here this evening. Right, in that case, if there is no further debate, the recommendation has been proposed and seconded as set out in the report and officer's presentation, and it is to refuse. So, Laura, could I ask you to do the roll call, please? Thank you.
Of course, Chair. For the final time this evening, councillors, I will remind you that you must not vote if you were not present for the entirety of the item. So Councillor Asman.
Agree.
Councillor Bearder.
Agree.
Councillor Corbyn.
I'm agreeing with the recommendation to refuse.
Yep. Councillor Garton.
Yes, agree.
Councillor Gomer.
Agree.
Councillor House.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Jerd.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Curl.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Pretty.
Agree to refuse.
Councillor Tennant.
Agree.
Councillor Trace.
Agree to refuse.
That's unanimous to refuse as per the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. And just to re-emphasise that, councillors all agreed with the recommendation to refuse the proposal to remove the trees. Thank you. Thank you very much, Kitty. Right, we'll now move on to item 15, which is planning appeals. And I'll ask members if they have any objection to us just noting the appeals, please. No, I don't see any objections. In which case then, thank you, councillors, those appeals are noted. This now brings us to the end of our meeting, and I would very much like to thank the members of the public who have watched this evening, and I hope you found it interesting and informative. Also to our speakers and those who provided written statements. And councillors, thank you very much. I know this is the new world as it is, but I think quite honestly it has been quite successful. So this concludes our meeting, and I would just like to take the opportunity, as I said, to thank you all for listening. The next meeting will be held on the 28th of September at 7 p.m. And there again, it is quite likely it will be held as a virtual meeting. So once again, thank you all very much, and I bid you good night. And councillors, could you just stay on just for a few minutes, please? Thank you.